Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation and Housing convenes this budget hearing. First public notice was issued to the media on Monday, February 10th, and then on Tuesday, February 18th. And for the record, today is Friday, February 21st, 2020. It is now 1:30. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on the following. Bill 282-35 LS, the fiscal year 2021 appropriation act as requested by the governor relative to the Guam Department of Education fiscal year 2021 budget request. Joining us for this public hearing is, I have to my left, I have Senator Regine Besco-Lee, I have Senator Kelly Mars Taitano. To my right, I have Senator Tello Taitagui. I know that the oversight of education will be here shortly, and that's Senator Talina Nelson. Also, I have Senator Amanda Shelton is present. General rules for the public hearing. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will be recognized in the order of the sign-up on the sign-in sheet. Written testimony may be read. Lengthy written testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Being that this is the budget for DOE, the superintendent will be allowed more than 5 minutes. Okay, written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopy. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. We're talking about DOE. So folks, let's not talk about any other agencies, okay? Let's stick with just DOE. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. I have here listed normally only once, but we're gonna continue the dialogue until we're done with your budget. Once you're done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony, as may be desired by the members of the panel. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and or may be asked to leave or be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone, and you will state your name for the record. At this time, I ask the panel members from the Guam Department of Education to please rise, for our Sergeant at Arms to please swear you in. Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. Mr. Superintendent, Madam Chair, it'll be the Madam Chair from the Board of Education, if you would like to first address the panel. Ma'am.
Half a day, then good afternoon, Chairman San Agustin and members of the committee. My name is Maria Atalik Gutierrez, Chairwoman of the Guam Education Board. This afternoon, on behalf of the Guam Education Board, and especially the students, families, and employees of the Guam Department of Education, I come to present our proposed fiscal year 2021 budget request in the amount of $365 million. We started our budget process in October last year, when the superintendent requested that schools meet with their stakeholders to identify their major needs and priorities. From there, the budget were presented to the superintendent and his team. And then they came for review and approval by our board before being transmitted to the legislature. Our board fully stands behind this budget request because we know that it represents what our stakeholders have determined to be the funding level needed to provide our children with the best education possible. And we ask you to give the request your full consideration, your full support, and your full approval. As you know, Public Law 2845, that every student is entitled to an Adequate Education Act, which was introduced by Senator Robert Kliskey and passed unanimously by the legislature in 2005, sets forth 14 mandates to provide students with an adequate education. 1, a certified teacher for every class. 2, certified professional administrators. 3, certified guidance counselors. 4, 5th, certified allied health professionals. 6, and you always hear this, air-conditioned or properly ventilated classrooms. 7, portable water. 8, a reliable source of electricity. 9, proper sanitation. 10, adopted and required textbooks. 11, certified librarians. 12, a healthy, safe learning environment. 13, at least 180 days or 900 hours of instruction per year. 14, regular, timely school bus transportation. This is the special ed buses. The law says that failure to meet these mandates subjects all of us as public officials involved in education to a potential lawsuit by any public student who wishes to assert their rights. For this reason, it is important that we seek the necessary resources to meet the standards set by our government in the Adequate Education Act. And that's only the DOE schools that are mandated to follow the Adequate Education Act. In past years, our appropriations have never reached the level of our requests, and we are aware of the government's limited resources. In 2018, due to the federal tax cuts, GDOE led the way in working with our community to find ways to reduce spending by over 12 million, much of which we did by temporarily deferring spending without compromising the core services provided to our students. In fiscal year 2019, we maintained these reductions and cut further, while our DOE employees had to forego salary increments and teacher reclassifications. And while we were able to maintain services, it has taken a toll on our department as we tried to do more with less. This year, we continue to do what we can to keep our students safe, provide healthy learning environment in all schools, and stretch our resources. Even as we see the budgetary implications that might arise due to this year's coronavirus scare, on top of this, the recurring shortfall in the Territorial Education Facility Fund, TEF, of $2.1 million in fiscal year 2019, and upwards of $15 million if we go back several years, means that we are getting even less than what the legislature has promised, leading to our inability to pay vendors timely for providing food to our students, cleaning our facilities, and keeping our lights and water on. I say this all to all of you up there to assure you that we are doing what we can to serve our students, despite knowing full well the limited resources are impacting our ability to give our students the education they deserve. Despite these limited resources, our students are continuing to make progress and reach their goals of graduating so they can take advantage of college and career opportunities. In 2019, our graduation rate hit a high of 87.3%, due to our focused efforts to ensure that our kids succeed in getting their diplomas so that they can move on to the next chapter of their lives. This is our mission, and with your full support, we will continue to make progress because we all know that our success will lead to a stronger, more resilient, more productive community in the future for the island of Guam. Thank you, Zanzizus Maasi, again for allowing me the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your full consideration, your full support, and your full approval of our budget request as we work together to support our teachers, our students, our employees, and family of the Department of Education. Jesus Maasi, Maria Gutierrez, Chairwoman, Guam Education Board. Buenos dias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to also recognize my colleagues that have joined us. I have on my far left would be Senator Jim Moylan. To my far right would be Senator Luis Muñoz and Senator Sabina Perez. And as you all know, Madam Chair and everyone else on the Department of Education, your oversight chair is the Vice Speaker, Senator Talina Nelson. Mr. Superintendent, you're next.
Hafa Adai and good afternoon, members of the committee, Chairman San Agustin, Vice Speaker Nelson, our Education Committee Chair, Senator Shelton, our Chair for our Education Committee as well, and also all the senators here today. I want to thank you for the opportunity to represent the Guam Department of Education and to provide testimony on behalf of our management team, our division heads, our administrators, teachers, staff, and most especially our students and families. I believe you all have a copy of the testimony, hopefully that you can use and follow along, as well as a more lengthy narrative with much more detail that I think you also have up there for further reading and again getting into some of the again details of the things that we'll try to cover in today's discussion. As you know, and we recognize that the department is the largest agency in the government, and therefore, as we can understand, there's a lot of different things and activities that are going on that I'm sure won't have enough time to cover today, but we'll be glad to talk about and, if need be, follow up as the committee desires. The GDOE is comprised of 41 schools, including 26 elementary schools, 8 middle schools, 6 high schools, and J.P. Torres Success Academy, which is currently operating at a Santa Rita location as well as at the Teton Central campus. Official enrollment as of September 30th, 2019 was 28,812, representing a 2.9% decline from the prior year. Before I begin discussion of the 2021 budget request, I believe I would be remiss if I did not take this time to recall the broader budgetary environment that continues to affect DOE and other government agencies. And I know that you will be the last people I need to remind, but I think for the general public's sake, to kind of talk about where we are today, having gone through some challenges over the past couple of years. I think in short, I think we can describe the department as operating in very tight and uncertain budgetary times. If you recall, in FY 2018, when DOE received an appropriation amount of $237.2 million. However, the December 2017 federal tax cuts had an immediate negative impact on our local revenues, and GDOE took steps proactively working with our stakeholders to identify and realize $12.3 million in budgetary savings as part of an overall government effort to cut spending. To generate these savings, the GDOE froze central office and administrator hiring, reduced contractual services, delayed the expansion of our pre-kindergarten initiative, held off the onboarding of substitute teachers, and highly leveraged the flexibility given to the superintendent to ensure that core operations were maintained. In addition to these cuts, at the end of the fiscal year, GDOE had to also absorb an additional $1.8 million shortfall in what was expected to come from the general fund. So this added to a total of $14.1 million in reductions from where we started the fiscal year when the budget was approved. The following year, in fiscal year 2019, GDOE was appropriated $219.9 million, which was an additional $2.8 million reduction from where we ended fiscal year 18. So not just the reductions, but the general fund shortfall. In addition to that, an additional $2.8 million cut. In order to meet that reduction, we had to extend what we had hoped would be temporary budget cuts in FY18, but we had to extend it through the fiscal year, and in addition, the government implemented a freeze on salary increments as well as teacher reclassifications. While this helped with the budget savings, I just wanted to, to say that the freeze simply added salt to the wound for many employees who were relied upon to continue teaching and supervising our children with less staffing and resource support. Now again, this is not to cast blame on anyone, but to just reiterate the fact that in these hard budgetary times, many of our government employees bore the brunt of what happens when you don't have the resources and supports that you would normally have during any budget year. So we didn't, even though those increments and reclassifications were frozen, I think we all felt the same, that we would like to avoid that, going forward. So we endured those cuts, and then again at the end of the year of FY19, GDOE was faced with an additional $2.5 million cash shortfall. 2.1 million of that was due to the TEF shortfall that I know that we've raised recently with the legislature as a separate matter. And this was $2.1 million that was intended to flow to GDOE through the Territorial Educational Facilities Fund. So if you see the chart, starting from where we were in FY 2018 appropriation level, the adjusted 2018 brought us down $12 million. When we were shorted cash, that was an additional 1.8. The appropriations level brought us down a $2.8 million further. And then with the cash shortfall in 2019, we really ended up with $19 million, over $19 million in reductions in our budget since basically since October 1st, 2017. And so I think that really characterizes where the agency has been, and many other agencies, of course, but definitely where GDOE has been in trying to maneuver and navigate through this environment as we try to continue to promote services for our children. While the 2020 appropriation came in at $223.7 million, this was $6.3 million more than where we ended FY19 at GDOE. We already knew that approximately $2.2 million of these additional funds were needed to support the immediate reinstatement of salary increments, which was about $889,000, teacher reclassifications, which was another $760,000, as well as a transfer of grass cutting services in the amount of $394,000 from the Mayor's Council of Guam to GDOE. So already $2 million of that $6 million was accounted for almost from day one. In addition, while it looks like that would mean the $4 million increase remained, given the fact that we've seen these prior year shortfalls, that $4 million essentially ends up being used to try to pay back the vendors who have to wait longer to really be timely paid for their services. So I guess the way we look at it is we're almost in the same position as we were when we ended the year last year, and going forward, even though there's talk of surplus, we know for sure that in times like this, when we're talking about tourism and this health scare, in Asia, and the potential for the impact on this year's budget, we know that we can't count on any of that. So again, we continue to try to do what we can to provide our kids with their education, but we know that we're not out of the woods yet, and we know that we need to be very resourceful in trying to, again, manage through the situation. So, right now, I know we'll talk about cash flow later. Right now, what it looks like in FY 2020 and in the current year is that we are currently receiving about $3.65 million on a weekly basis from DOA, which really is our general fund allotment schedule that divided over 52 weeks. So we get 3.65 every week. That adds up on a biweekly basis to a little bit over $7 million. That's just barely enough to cover our payroll, plus some additional funds to try to cover critical contracts. The reason why we're in that situation is that we do have additional sources of revenue, including $14.7 million that that are set aside in TEF, but we don't have access to those funds until such time as the property taxes are collected and realized. So DOA is, is waiting until the February and April collections come in, and once those collections come in and are verified, at that point we start to receive the TEF, the majority of the TEF funds. So at this point, we're seeing probably around 5 to 10% of the TEF funds released to this point. The remainder is on hold until such time as property taxes are paid. So what that means from an operational standpoint is throughout the year, we're working to cover, pay our employees first, keep the lights on, keep the water on, and try to ensure that our vendors are covered in terms of what they're providing. But some of our vendors simply have to wait longer until we get to that February and April timeframe where we have that additional relief to then cover those costs. For smaller vendors, and I know many of you hear from them directly, for smaller vendors, it's critical because we know that they don't have as much cushion, that they've got to pay their employees too, and so we work hand in hand, whatever we can do with the small vendors. Our larger vendors, we know, are able to withstand some, maybe a little bit of a delay, but at some point, they also come calling, and so, we work with them to see how far we can get before we need to start, making sure that we're paying them what they're owed. I think for this reason, I'm sure there are vendors out there who are just opting not to bid on projects or not to participate with GDOE or the government in general, if they feel that they can't operate with that type of uncertain cash flow. I think just as Mr. Gutierrez said, despite all this, I am proud to say that with the support of our administrators and our division heads, our teachers and our staff, there is a continued focus on how we can continue to serve our students out in each of our 41 schools. Our high school graduation rate reached an all-time high of 87.3% in 2019, which is up from 69% in 2012. The dropout rate had a slight increase to 3.2%, but is down 2 full percentage points from where we were, again, back in 2012. We're seeing more kids participate in career and technical education opportunities with GCC. We had 1,000 students take the WorkKeys assessment and a record 98 students receiving a platinum score, which for those of you from the business community or who are familiar with WorkKeys understand that we're talking about not a high school assessment, we're talking about a work readiness assessment. So we're very proud to see that progress. When it comes to standardized testing around using the ACT Aspire, we do find our students ready or close to ready in English, in math, close to ready in their elementary years, but as they get into the higher grades, a continued challenge to have more students move into that close or ready category. And then with reading, with literacy being a major challenge, there is a lot of support that continues to be needed from 3rd grade to 9th grade years. So while we see progress, there is still a lot more to do to ensure that all of our students are able to maximize their potential as GDOE graduates. And that's the environment, and we will continue to push ahead despite the challenges that we see as a government in terms of the resources available. Now, in the 2021 budget request, it looks like we're again coming into you with a $365 million request. And I know in conversations with you, I think the conversation we have is, you guys keep coming in with a very significant request. And of course we understand that, given that we were only received, 64% less, in our actual appropriation. However, whenever we start the budget process, we look at the requirements of the law, we look at the framework under which we are supposed to be evaluating the needs of our students, and again, we cited not just the Organic Act, which identifies public education as a mandate, but we always go back to the Adequate Education Act, which sets forth 14 clear mandates that we are supposed to meet, and really subjects, gives students an opportunity to assert their rights if any of those mandates are not met. And so in trying to meet and trying to communicate what we think is necessary to meet those goals and those mandates, we go through the process with our schools, starting off with their stakeholder meetings. They bring their budgets, they scrub their budgets, bring it to the central office, and we go through it with the superintendent and management team. And after that, we then go to the board, have several work sessions, and then move into board review and approval. And I think the whole gist of it is to let the legislature know that if we look at each of the 14 points, this is what we think is needed to help us meet those mandates. As you might expect, and there's a chart that kind of lays out the 14 points and the categories and dollar amounts associated with it. As you might expect, personnel costs, of course, drive a significant amount of our requests. Now, in this request, it comes to about 62% of that overall $365 million request. Usually when our budget is approved, that percentage is actually around 85%, which means after you pay all your employees, the remainder of your budget really is left to cover the rest of your operations and other things. So really what drives our actual budget is largely, and again, between 80 to 90% personnel. The way we look at our personnel needs, obviously, is not just, there's very clear mandates in the 14 points, looking at teacher ratios, certification for teachers, professional administrators, counselors, nurses, allied health professionals, and so forth. And also our collective bargaining agreement with the Guam Federation of Teachers, in which we set forth the requirements for staffing. And so with that, that's you can expect that's why the majority of our budget is driven by those personnel requirements. I do want to point out that in this budget, there has been a continued discussion with the legislature and amongst our board members about special education and one-to-one aids. And we are, I think that the challenge is to see if there's ever an opportunity to provide more full-time one-to-one aids to serve our students with disabilities. We would like to get into that. We'd like to see that opportunity arise. And some of that has been brought to the surface here in discussions about safety, school safety, and we hear from parents all the time. Having part-time one-to-one aides raises challenges in terms of retaining our employees. We're training these employees to work with our most vulnerable students, and it really presents a challenge in trying to guarantee the services that we need to for our kids. The second major component is $17.2 million in funding for textbooks and supplemental instructional materials. So the reason this is in there, as you know, is this represents the goal of trying to get a textbook for every child, looking at our adopted textbook schedule and what's already been approved. And then also an additional $17 million is captured in our utilities, what we expect to pay in utilities. The final major component of our of the budget is our $36.6 million in capital outlay funds to address the significant facility needs that have been well documented since the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers report in 2013 showing $90 million in deferred maintenance. So this has been one of our biggest challenges. We know that at the current time, our government is unable to borrow the resources needed to fix facilities. And that's just due to our debt capacity and our debt ceiling. And so it really leaves agencies in the position of trying to fund major capital improvements through our operating budget. I think it's a concept known as pay-as-you-go, funding for capital. But that's really, it really is difficult to do this when you see the resources are so limited. There's never extra money lying around to do to do the major projects. A lot of what we do with our current operating budget is go from school to school trying to make the repairs that we can for the immediate health and safety of our kids. But the major projects that require much more, a higher level of resources, hard to get to because there are so many needs across the school district. But what we did is we included in our budget what we would love to see in an ideal world, an investment in our capital, in our facilities. And these range from major canopy construction and repair at schools like Benevente Middle School, Finnegassen Elementary, and others, roofing repairs across the district, restroom renovations across the district, temporary classroom repairs, lighting repairs, and electrical upgrades, flooring, demolition, and many other projects. I believe they're in some of the schedules that you have, but again, $90 million in deferred maintenance. There's no way we're going to get that amount at any one time. But when we put this proposal in place, it was to get an installment on some of that work and continue to work with the legislature on hopefully finding some kind of long-term dedicated funding source for facility improvements. I want to recognize, I know that Senator Moylan put forth a couple of ideas regarding tax credit financing. And as I said, we're open to ideas. We're using the municipal lease back with Simon Sanchez. I mean, there's many different ways we could think about how we can solve this problem. But again, the reason you see this big amount is that we haven't been able to find a steady source of major, a significant source of resources to make the necessary investments. Beyond the request of funding support, I just want to seek the opportunity to ask for the continued flexibility and authority needed to address the department's budgetary needs as we head into 2021. As I testified last year, in times of budget uncertainty and reductions, I think you've said and I've said agency directors really need the ability to shift resources where needed in order to ensure that personnel get paid, contractual obligations are fulfilled, and operations are able to continue, in our case, in service to our school children. The board did address, I know that Senators, Chairman San Agustin and Vice Speaker Nelson, we had a discussion about site-based management or how to have more transparency into what money, funds were going to the schools. That issue was raised in our board work sessions. At this point, I think our administrators definitely have not indicated they're not ready to embrace that at this point. They understand, I think, the issue of how do we drive resources to our schools and make sure we're maximizing those resources. But in this environment where budget resources are dwindling and are being cut, I think the overall issue for all of us is to secure the resources necessary to move forward. And then if we want to talk about site-based management, have that conversation as we start to stabilize, the budget situation. So thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present testimony. We want to continue to work with you and your staff to finalize the 2021 Appropriations Act. We're here and available to answer any questions. Should we not have the ability to answer all the questions here this year, we'd be happy to follow up with any further questions and answers in the weeks that follow. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I'd like to also recognize my colleagues that have joined us. I have to my far left would be Senator Jose Piru Terlai, and to my far right be Senator Therese Terlai. And before I start questioning, I think the Vice Speaker would like to ask you a simple question or make clarification of a statement you made on your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, good afternoon, Superintendent. If I'm a principal and I need to have a restroom renovated, what is the process?
So first of all, I'll take it from the standpoint of where we are today in the budget process. They've asked for the restroom renovations. There is a maintenance system in which we can request for work to be done on the restrooms, and those are tracked in our financial management system. So we do rely on the principals to identify the need and let us know what those needs are.
So how do they submit the request?
Well, in this process,
Or how would I submit the request?
through work orders for normal maintenance, but also in this budget request, we ask them to include those requests and amounts in their budget.
Through a work order? How do I submit the work order?
Through Munis, which is our financial
Munis.
management system.
Okay. Who determines the priority of my school's restroom when I submit the work order?
Well, it primarily, the facilities and maintenance division is charged with reviewing all of the requests that come in from the schools, and there are voluminous requests. So I think what happens in the case of a restroom, what we're talking about in restroom renovations is whole-scale renovations. But typically how these come in are repairs to a toilet or plumbing or a leak that happens. And what our facilities division will do is look at the immediate health and safety needs first, the emergency needs first, and dedicate their time and resources to those versus, projects where the resources may not be available.
So Guam Department of Education has a facilities and maintenance division, right, that would address these priorities.
Correct.
That's how it's currently done, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How would it be done if DOE moved to site-based management?
I'm not sure. It depends. There may be different models. I think I think if it was pure site-based management and you gave the authority to the principal, they would have to look at their resources and then determine how to proceed in procuring the necessary services
Okay.
or securing the services needed for that renovation.
So that's why I ask these questions, because I just want to clear the mud out of this.
Sure.
We arbitrarily use site-based management, but we're not talking about a specific site-based management. The intent to have the schools submit their budgets and to try to appropriate the budgets within the schools would give the principals the authority to do things the way they do today, which is go through Munis, to submit through the operations and maintenance, or for them to determine their own priority with their school so that they have the money available for them. And so that was something that we tried to work out, not to give the principals more responsibility, more headaches. It was really to ensure them that if your priority is an awning or a canopy, then you're going to get that priority because this is how much we are appropriating to your school. But I just wanted to make that very clear because I think, there was a lot of misinformation in the previous, and we're still trying to figure out this information. So this is the information. So instead of arbitrarily using site-based management, and we don't really know the approach to site-based management, the intent was that the principal tracks their own money, they discern their own priority, and it is enacted in that manner through the Munis system, the process that they currently go through.
Right.
So I think that stops the discussion there, because perhaps maybe next year we can find something else to address those issues. But really the purpose is DOE is a third of the government's appropriation. And so we don't really see this 800-page documentation to really be able to tear apart how DOE is functioning. We get a lot of grievances, we get a lot of concerns that things are not being done a certain way, but how do we take apart this budget? And so we're creating an avenue, not just for ourselves, but a transparency to the parents to see how this money is being spent, whether it's being used for, 180 instructional days. I just need to be sure that I'm accounted for 180 instructional days. But there's about $23 million dedicated to ensuring that there's 180 instructional days, which is a very vague interpretation in accordance with the law. And so we don't see where the consolidated grants are spent, and I'm understanding now that you are restructuring the way your federal programs are being done. And so this is just a lack of transparency that we don't see at the legislature, and neither do the parents. And so it's really hard to help buckle down into this budget if there's no transparency there and misinformation is continually given. And so I want to stop it at that, and I'll give it to the chair to start with the questionings, but I just wanted to make it clear that the site-based management information that's being given to the principals, telling them that they're going to be given additional responsibility, they're going to be in charge of their own procurement, was never the intent.
Right. If I could, I'm not, and again, not to disagree with you. I think the issue is, you're absolutely correct that there isn't a very, first of all, there isn't a very clear understanding of what anybody is talking about with regard to site-based management. There is a conceptual understanding, and I think our principals are sophisticated enough to know what that range of site-based management approaches might be. But
No, I'm not saying the principals are not being sophisticated enough. I'm saying that the misinformation was given, telling them that they were going to do all of these responses.
Right.
But that's neither here nor there. Let's
No,
talk about
what I'm
the
saying is
budget,
that I
because
just-
the misinformation that's being given is just misinformation. So now that we cleared that, we can work over towards the next year.
Right. No, what I'm saying is that this, because I don't want to be looked at as giving misinformation to principals. What I want to say is that I think the discussion we had last year about transparency, we definitely will, are on board. And if there's any way we can continue to be transparent, let us know. It is 800-page document because that is the nature of this agency and budget. We have to go scrub through that, and we're happy to work through any of those issues.
Well, I'll tell you how you can
with
be
you.
transparent. I'll tell
Sure.
you how you can inform the legislature if there are changes into your approaches of federal programs, how you can inform the legislature that the SPED department is having issues, how you can inform the legislature how we can help our principals who are not agreeing with your student-based assessment. So those are some of the concrete things that we need to know about.
No, absolutely. We're happy
And
to
all of that
report back.
impacts with the budget, right?
Right. No, we'd be happy to report all of those issues to you. We do that all the time with,
After the
in,
inquiry is sent.
well, in response.
It's better for us to be proactive.
Well, in response to our Guam Education Board is charged primarily with those responsibilities, so we are always in those conversations through those committees. Now, we're happy to have those conversations with the legislature as well. I mean, I don't think we would shy away from those discussions. They're very fruitful and robust discussions. So there are matters that the legislature and the committee would like to go through. We'd be happy to walk through those.
Yes, and so that's why we're setting up a continuing roundtable meeting to discuss further your consolidated grants, to discuss further each division within the Department of Education, and dissecting this budget of yours.
That's fine. I mean, I
Thank
didn't
you.
come today to prepare to discuss the consolidated grant and the federal funds.
No.
It is outlined in the narrative, but just in a short response, there is restructuring going on because we are in the midst of re-upping a 3-year grant, preparing for another 3-year grant cycle with the U.S. Department of Education. As part of that, they require that we adjust our activities to ensure, in this case, in this year, more evidence-based activities and more outcomes focused. And so when we go out there, the guidance that we typically get is from U.S. Department of Education, and they're the ones, in fact, who would be charged with approving the ways in which we restructure the use of federal funds. So that's
All right.
But we're
No,
happy to brief you on that.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Superintendent, on your page 1,
Sure.
third paragraph, you identified, however, the December 2017 federal tax cut. I just want to make sure it's very clear that that has to do with the Trump tax cut.
Yes.
Okay?
Absolutely, the Trump tax
I want
cut.
to make sure we have that very clear on that one. But I have a very short list of questions before I ask my colleagues to ask you questions. But DOE has spent more than $25 million in the last 10 years to have a third-party fiduciary agent handling federal funding. The $25 million could have benefited our schools and support our students. I know that you're heading in the direction to have it lifted. Where is DOE at? And when it's lifted, and hopefully it's lifted soon, what is the direction you anticipate on using the $2.5 million that is put into your budget?
So where we are right now is that US DOE is scheduled, they were originally scheduled to come in February, but they pushed back the visit to April. So the week of April 20th, at least this is the latest confirmation, is when a team of US DOE officials will be on island to basically do an on-site validation of all of the items that were included in what we hope will be this final reconsideration evaluation plan that we call the REP. It was, we negotiated the REP with Assistant Secretary Frank Brogan. It contained a list of items and evidence that needed to be submitted. Some of that evidence has been reviewed virtually, but at the end of the day, they have to conclude it with an on-site visit, at which point they will validate which items have been validated and are cleared, and if there are things that aren't clear, they will identify those, and we will then go from there. We are hopeful that and confident that that review will show that we have addressed all of the special conditions that have been required of us over these past, since 2009. In terms of what we were supposed to do with the corrective action plan, these are in 5 areas: procurement, fixed assets, employee time tracking, internal controls, and our financial management system. So we're working closely with them. They are coming in April, and we're looking forward to a positive visit. So I hope at that point, July 1st is kind of our date when we usually get the new memo for the new grant year, and that's where they reiterate those special conditions. Our push has been to try to get us off those special conditions by that time. So the April visit will be a determining visit.
All right. You have federal grants. What federal grants have you already received for 2020? And can some of these federal funds be used to pay for capital improvement programs?
So we received consolidated grant funding from US DOE, which is basically all the various titles in the ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. We're allowed to consolidate those resources, which are given to us on a formula basis, and then use those for primarily supplemental services to our kids. We receive special education funding. We receive Head Start funding, and then we receive funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture for school breakfast and lunch programs. We do receive also Department of Interior funds in a smaller amount, and it's those funds that we're able to use towards capital improvements, but it's also based on DOI's requirements. So currently, the funds that we have under DOI are going to address deferred maintenance. This is in line with the work that they put in to try to assess the $90 million in deferred maintenance. They've committed $1 million each year, up to $5 million, to try to address those needs. A lot of that has gone into some of the repairs of our awnings and fire alarm systems, electrical upgrades that were deemed high priority by the Army Corps report. That leaves $85 million and growing of unaddressed capital, but that's primarily where we have the opportunity to make some of those major investments.
All right. Based on your current accounts payable, and a very simple administrative announcement, if you have your cell phone, if you can't turn it off, put it on vibrate or leave it outside the room, okay? You got that, right? Okay, thank you. Based on your current accounts payable, your top 20 lowest vendors equate to 20K, 23K.
Yes.
Why can't this be liquidated and paid
Yes, no, absolutely. I know I did not introduce the team that was here, but I do want to, for the record, introduce Dr. Zenny Asuncion, who was our newly hired Deputy for Finance and Administrative Services. We've sat down since she's come on board and said, the top issue for us, especially in this year and having gone through the past couple of tight years, is cash flow. So cash flow, again, pay your employees, keep the lights on, and so forth. But what's left over, or what we're able to do for these outstanding aging payables, we need to figure out how to address that. So she's well aware. Over the last couple of weeks, we have discussed the fact that there are some of these vendors for very low amounts that have been aging, and so she's working on trying to get those tackled. But I think if I'm clear on what you're saying, that we're talking about small amounts, small vendors that have been aged 60 to 90 days. We're going to try to clear those.
Okay, because you are aware that we do have a bill to appropriate property 2.1 to pay for your vendors. But when you pass the year, it goes under the deficit amounts. Right. So it's like DOE saying, give me money to pay my vendors. I'm not saying I'm not supporting you, but every agency is going to come in, then the deficit just goes away. And that's not possible. Because I've talked to downtown, they said that all the amounts that you owe past a certain date is under the deficit amount. So if that is such, then I'm looking at my report, I'm looking at all your aging accounts. I see Sodexo here. Sodexo, you're providing free lunches. Why do you even have an amount you need to pay when you're getting free lunches? That should have been all zeroed out by federal grants. I'm just going over certain numbers, Mr. Superintendent. I'm trying to make sure that your folks at your accounting site gets the numbers right, because the vice speakers asked me, let's push the 2.1. If it's going under the deficit total, I gotta be mindful of all the other agencies that can't pay their vendors. And it's like, well, don't get a vendor you don't have the budget for. And then, on your letter, you said you've got a letter. Your testimony says you agreed to your allotment, but you're short. And I'm trying to understand, how are you short when, if we follow your plan, the 14 points, because I'm quite familiar with your 14 points. What point here are you failing and you can't fulfill by law? That the threat of being sued. Which one is it there of the 14? Could you identify which one?
If I had to guess, it would be around the facility issues. So keeping a healthy, safe environment.
So which number is that? That's
Your healthy, safe environment would be one of those areas, right?
number 12?
Number 12 would be my key concern. I mean, there are other
Number
areas,
12,
but
right?
my key concern would be.
The reason why
our
I'm
facility.
asking this, if we went down the line, Mr. Superintendent, I'm going to ask you, do you have a certified teacher? I mean, I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but I'm just trying to go down the numbers so we have a clear understanding, okay? Because my colleagues I know are going to be asking more closer to the same question. Number one, certified teachers. Do you have a certified teacher in every classroom?
So.
Yes or
we
no?
have
That's-
no, we have a shortage of certified teachers.
How
and
many, what is your shortage number today?
I think we have probably a shortage of about 200 certified teachers who are limited term or retirees who come in. So we're at the end of the fully certified teachers full-time, we're always ending up with about 150 to 200 short
Okay,
every
but
year.
Mr. Superintendent, last year, when we started the fiscal year, there was an announcement, you had a shortage of teachers, and then the announcement was you were able to cover it with retirees, emergency.
Some, yes. Well, no, that we do have emergency certified. I mean, they're all college educated. We have college degree
Right.
employees who have not taken the praxis or taken the necessary education
Right.
courses to achieve their certification. So one of the programs we are working on this year through our federal programs is working with those existing limited term teachers who are interested in certification to get them through the coursework and praxis so
Okay,
they
but-
can fill those positions.
But see, if we have the funding for certified teacher, I'm trying to do the numbers, huh? You got emergency certified, what is it costing here versus your full certified teacher without the emergency requirement, or you hire your retirees?
Right.
See, when the announcement was made last year that you feel your shortage is not as bad as what was said earlier in the year, the 300, it became a lot
Right.
less.
Those are the
So-
vacant positions, right? Vacant positions. Those are probably what we're talking about.
Well, and
where there's no
that's-
limited term or a full-time teacher. in
But that's
place.
why I'm asking the question, and because you have the funding, supposedly, okay, you have sufficient funding. What is it costing you on the budget? And that's why I wanted. Yeah, and I think that's what the concern of the vice speaker was.
No, I understand.
As we go down each one, Mr. Superintendent,
I'm
I
trying to
would
keep
just,
track of
you know,
your
I don't want to
questions.
go down every one of them because we'll be here until tomorrow. Okay, I just wanted to hit one. And remember, and you know, I'm very familiar with the 14 points. I just wanted to touch on that. And I don't even want to ask about your hiring. Okay, we can jump. I'm just going to jump real quick to Simon Sanchez. You sent a letter to the governor asking about, I think the bill that we have, the 2.9, that you and I have communicated with, and the vice speakers 100% support that. But my question would be, you were given appropriations to fund the reconstruction of Simon Sanchez, but what is the progress of that? Appropriation, remember, we talked about this, but I want to make sure this is out in the open to the people. Public, in FY 2019, Public Law 34-42 gave you 500,000. On that same year, Public Law 34-116 gave you 1 million. And in 34-117, 1.5. Probably never received due to the fiscal alignment, okay? And I just need your folks to clarify it. And then in 2020, in our budget, we gave you 500,000. Then you're down to, you got from the governor 1.1. So that should be, gosh, that's almost, you don't need the 2.9. If I do the simple math, 1 + 1 + 5 is 3 million.
So
Pretty close.
Right. So what we're requesting is, I think as before we've mentioned the fact that there's been authorization for those funds and not fully received in cash.
Okay.
And it's been over it's been over several fiscal years. So where we started this year, especially as we've gone into the design phase, which we are in the middle of procuring right now, we identified. We sought support from the governor to provide the cash to fulfill the legislature's prior authorizations. What we did receive was a commitment for $1.1 million that we are working with them to be able to draw down when the time is right, and then the remaining gap was 2.9 million. So I think the authorization existed, in prior authorizations.
But no funding came in.
Right. You
Okay.
proposed a funding source from the surplus as well. And so, again, either way, it's a cash issue. And my anticipation is that based on where we are today, we're in the middle of the procurement, but we're hoping to be able to move forward with a contract within the next 2 to 3 weeks, try to get that finalized. We're going to need then at that point to ensure that we've certified funding.
Well, I'm going to be pushing that bill and trying to get it to a vote on March's session, okay? The 2.9. Because your oversight chair wants to get that. She's alumni of Simon Sanchez.
No, for sure.
My children are from Simon Sanchez. We're going to figure out a way to get this done and settled. Because you have other schools that may be screaming very soon. And we have to
Yes.
take care of one at a time. Just real quick, vacancy. You have an increase in vacancy and new positions in 2021, budget request. But I see a decrease in actual warm bodies in your staffing pattern. Vacant position in 2020 was 372. 2021 would be 429, 57 more than 2020.
Yeah.
New positions in 2020, there was 353. You have an increase in 2021 of 37 more. Jump to 390, and then you have filled warm position. You have, in 2019, you had 2,598. In 2020, you had 2,542, 56 less. But you're asking for more, but then you hire less. Is it because of funding?
So what I appreciate is that, you've given the flexibility to be able to fund what's needed in the department based on the resources that are available. And what's happened in the past couple of years is we've slowed down, or for a time we just absolutely froze hiring in the central offices. So when you see vacant positions in the central offices, that's the result. The vacancies that you might see at the school level are just point-in-time vacancies because we're continuing to try to fill those school positions. That's the priority. But what the central office will tell you is, there are vacant positions, there that we've said hold off until we're able to get into a better situation with the budget, and we, can then start to prioritize those needs. So those vacancies, we've held over. The new positions that are being requested, a lot of those are being driven, as I spoke before, by the collective bargaining. A lot of them are school-based, the collective bargaining agreement, and primarily. So that explains, I think, the vacancy numbers. We realize we're holding on to a lot of those vacant positions, and even though the division heads are here to press for filling some of their critical positions, we've just asked them to hold tight until we understand what our budget looks like for the coming year.
All right. Student enrollment. In school year 15 to 16, you had 30,821. In school year 16 to 17, you had 30,758. In school year 17 to 18, you had 30,112. Keeps getting less and less. In school year 18 to 19, you're 29,680, and now you're reporting you're at 28,000. I'm familiar with how many students you must have based on the contract. Is there adjustments being made where class, because I'm well aware that even if you have 10 students, you must pay for the classroom. I understand that. But I'm just trying to understand, you're asking for more people. Maybe it's not necessarily for the classroom, but it's in support, maybe directly or indirectly for the classroom and for the schools. But I'm just trying to understand that if you have less students, maybe you've got a plan that you can share with us later with the oversight chair, or you can share it now of what you're planning on doing in the schoolhouse. That,
Right.
If you have a bunch of classrooms that are empty or down to 5, shift the students. And then
Right.
on that same note, I'll ask it after if you wanted to share that plan if you have one.
Right. So, if we look back, prior to this year, if we look back to the years before then, we were able to explain some of that decline. In this particular year, I think we're going to need another year to kind of determine what's happening with the enrollment. But in the prior years, it tracked with the opening of charter schools. so that there were kids going to charter schools. So they weren't, we knew where they were. They weren't being lost from Guam, but in fact, for those years, the charter schools gained, and most of them came from our schools, but then we also received an influx. It turned out to be a net negative, but, we were able to explain that with the opening of additional school choices. The issue last year, we attributed to, I think between 250 to 300, we would say individuals affected by the BAM certificate graduation program, which was a fraudulent graduation program in which we were seeing high school students leave so they could get this, what was promised to them be a BAM diploma, which we since have seen, been handled by the Attorney General's office, right? So this year we're monitoring that decline. So I can't say much until we get to the next year in terms of seeing, because what happens as we work with our schools and we say, look, you've gone down here, right now, there's the schools will be in flux throughout the school year. But I think by next year we should have a more solid sense if this is going to be a trend that's not attributed to charter schools or, some other incident. A lot of the principals are worried about, and I think we'll see, about at the elementary level, the uncertain part is always a kindergarten class coming in. And so, we'll see if that ends up being normal, we see the numbers return, or whether we are seeing, that sustained lower levels. If that's the case, as we go through the evaluation of the school needs, we do know that you can't just remove a teacher because 3 students left. But in certain cases, if you're seeing significant impacts on a school basis, then we can make those kinds of decisions. So the board has asked, and it continues to ask, that we continue to cross-level the employees, the teachers, to reflect that. And so we'll continue to do so.
All right, thank you. Mr. Superintendent, you are aware that the governor's budget only recommends $219,616,932. You're aware of that, right?
Yes.
And you know that we in the Guam legislature last year, or for this fiscal year, we appropriated more than what she's requesting. I am focused on, and I know that pretty much every one of my colleagues here are headstrong on making sure that we take care of that number 12, the safe environment. Because I know that one of the individuals who's going to be speaking today is going to be talking about Benavente Middle School.
Absolutely.
Even what happened at Gem Grill, and it's in all the schools. You got slippery sidewalks. You got no walkway. Fencing is falling apart, and I would love to see every school at least being safe and a secured environment. Okay.
So if I could, what we put into the budget and provide the details for is so you understand what we're hearing at the school level, but as you see, it's a huge request. So what I've wanted to do and continue to work with you and the legislature to find some way to come up with a longer-term dedicated funding source that we can then use and plan around and maybe leverage through financing to tackle some of these bigger projects, because I think we're well aware we're not going to come up with $40 million extra, right? And I don't think we can afford to cut it out of other parts of the department and just dedicate it to capital, and then because most of that impact will happen on the personnel side. So we know we're wishing for the stars to have it all in one budget, but if we could work together on a dedicated funding source, we've talked about various ways to do it. I know it was brought up as part of the revenue increases. It was brought up as part of solar savings. There's other ways to look at it. I'd love to engage in that conversation, because that's really becoming a critical need. And should there become additional capacity within the debt ceiling to allocate resources for DOE, we would appreciate that as well.
Yes, we will. I will ask. We have also. We also have the speaker that have joined us today. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, Mr.
Sorry, I'm going to be out of line, but I did want to just ask, address the 2.1 million in TAF, because that did come from a request from the board to our vice speaker and education chair to address. I think you're absolutely correct. It is a outstanding vendor payable issue. It also is a deficit issue. Either way, we love to resolve it. I think the vice speaker, because she's focused on education, knows that, if that's going to be a solution for DOE, we'd love to see that happen. If in fact it goes into this deficit bucket, we're still going to push that it be the DOE deficit. Help us, because we're still tracking those payables. We're still accounting for it. They're still knocking on our doors. And so either way, we're hoping to find a solution.
Yes, and I'm be working with my colleagues and with downtown the administration on coming up with a deficit reduction plan, because we got to get you out of the hole you're in. I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, I know the DOE is in the hole. I was on the board when DOE was in the hole.
Right.
They're still trying to climb up, and we got to get this closer to maybe within 30 to 60 days only, and not longer. I mean, I see some of them as back as 2013.
For
I
the
don't
record,
understand
we
why
were
it's still
doing
there.
really well, and then when the Trump tax cuts hit, we just went right back into it. So we were getting more current, and we were looking at finally stabilizing, but that took us for another hit.
Well, if anything was to ever happen again in the future, I honestly believe that my colleagues would make sure that DOE does not take the full, the effect that happened on the previous administration.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes,
may.
ma'am.
The 2.1 million in the TEF for the vendor payments is from costs from 2018 and 2019. Is that correct? So it's not really part of what you're trying to pay off from years before. You're just trying to be current with the current vendors that you owe.
Right. Those are more recent, obligations, but we switched over to the next fiscal year, so they're still knocking to try to. Right. Exactly.
Yes, your oversight chair is trying to push the 2. I'm focused on the 2.9. And she wants both, and I don't blame her. And we're going to figure out a way how we can work this. I would start with, let me see, which side? Madam Speaker, would you like to ask questions now, or? All right, Senator Chalai, Pito, you have any questions? I know Senator Moynihan probably does, because he wants to fix all the safety, and I don't blame him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the panel. Mr. Fernandez, going back to your presentation on page 5, when you're looking at the 36.6 million in capital outlay funds to address our facilities, right? And the Army Corps of Engineers, since this report was back in 2013, of 90 million in deferred maintenance. And I'm glad you brought to our attention that we're unable to borrow anymore on capital improvements. Can you just refresh me a little bit on the capital improvement priorities, including the canopy construction? Can you help me visualize what Benavente Middle School is experiencing?
So, this has been a conversation that we've had with our Benavente Middle School stakeholders. I know Mr. Cooper is here as well. And it is frustrating. It is frustrating to look for how we can resolve that issue. I think we had Department of Interior funds. I mean, it's not a significant amount, but it's enough to start to tackle. But because they are looking at deferred maintenance, we asked whether we could use those funds for schools like Benavente Middle School. It's not the only school that needs construction, but definitely one of the top ones. They indicated that because it's deferred maintenance, they were only doing repairs of these old canopies that are deteriorating, broken, falling apart, and presenting safety hazards. What Benavente Middle School has is they have facilities that are separated from each other with no covered walkway. And so I think what Mr. Cooper is referencing is if you go there during the rainy season, kids are going to either have to wait in the gym until the rain subsides in order to get to some of those fast-track buildings, or if they go, they're likely to get wet. Same with the other buildings that were near we demolished earlier this school year the condemned annex portion of the campus, but there's another building just beyond that, again, where there aren't any covered walkways. And again, in dry season, it might seem okay, but in rainy season, presents a challenge because the kids either have to get wet or they're going to be held back until such time as the rain subsides.
So the canopies are non-existing for that school, and so
Right.
the price tag you were estimating was approximately.
It's significant if you're going to build a permanent one, which is we think we gave you an estimate of about $1 million to cover both.
When you're referring to those that are needing repairs, that's around, depending upon the school, it goes roughly.
Yeah, it could be $100,000 to $300,000 depending on the extent. So we had Agata Johnston Middle School being repaired, LBJ School had to have some awning repairs, Marshall Sablon, and I think Weddingale and Emu Lahan. But those were identified already in the deferred maintenance report, so those got priorities. But when it comes to construction, we don't have a federal source of funds for those.
The roofing repairs, what are you experiencing? What are the students seeing that you're highlighting, the roofing repairs? What is
On
happening?
roofing?
Yes.
So, when I first came on board, we had the ARA funds that were available. And so the roofing, we were able to, repair cracks in the roof and seal the roofs. And that, is supposed to get you 5 to 10 years of, secure roofs. We're getting towards the end of that period. And so what you see when you're having roof, issues is you're seeing leaks happening from the roofs. They're getting into duct systems or getting into cracks in the roof. And then what that ends up doing is, creating other issues, electrical issues, safety issues if you're having to deal with, water on the floor, and so forth. So when we talk about roof repairs, it really is going back, and these are old buildings, so it's going back, repairing new cracks, resealing, and maintaining those roofs for another, 5 to 10 year period.
And enlighten me with the restrooms also. What is our situation?
I think it was brought up last year in one school. I think Senator Tydegui brought it up, and I said this is not the only school. It's widespread when you're talking about old facilities. We had an incident at Simon Sanchez with the cleaners, and I think everybody heard about that, and it's still being addressed. But the challenge was there were cleaners in there who were using a water blaster, basically using Clorox to try to clean the showers. So, obviously we don't encourage, you're trying to get yourself in an unsafe situation. But I've seen the showers and what it takes to try to remove, all of the grit and grime that has built up over the many, many years. I think when you talk about renovations, it's the tiling, it's the plumbing systems, the fixtures, the stalls. It's just they're old, and I think our school administrators and our students, especially, we want to see some modernization, just bring them up to standard.
Okay.
For today's expectations.
Mr. Superintendent, if you can you give us a good list? And instead of me having like the Vice Speaker said, we don't have to sort through every school. Just give us a list of what are the issues out there. And I hate to say this, but I remember when I was on the board, I asked one principal this, why is your school dirty? And he said, because I don't have money for paint. I asked him, let me change the question. Why is your school dirty? And he goes, I still don't have money for paint. I said, you got a water blaster. You have 2 in your school. You got maintenance people. Water blast the school, and then we'll figure out how to get you to paint. Please provide the list.
Yep.
And then what are the plans? If
We
you
have the
have
list,
equipment to do it, then do it, because there are other questions. Senator Moylan, if you have anything else,
Yeah.
but anything general like that, I'd like him to provide a very simple, so I don't have to go through this.
So
and then
we will
just get
provide a
wrap up.
list, right, the list of schools and projects that were
Yes.
identified as part of this 30,
Please.
some million. But just keep in mind, these are what we consider major capital projects.
Yes.
So not simply just cleaning, but really replacing and repairing
Okay.
major parts.
Thank you. Do you have anything else, Senator Moylan?
Almost just
Okay.
a couple more. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our Army Corps of Engineers identified our deferred maintenance at $90 million. So this is back in 2013, right? And then you're letting us know that Department of Interior has provided us $5 million, so now we're at $85 million. But that's since 2013, so actually it's probably a lot more than $90 million that we need to get done on old schools. But we also understand that we see other campuses that are in good shape, right? Newer schools, of course, but what we see is that there's maintenance provided. And in your budget narrative, you were talking about 6 campuses, the JFK and Okuru and Tejan High School, and you're maintaining that it's privately outsourced on maintenance. Can you help me understand that some more, please?
So the secret to success for those schools has to do with the fact that we're in a lease structure, and as part of our lease payment, we're not just paying for occupancy, we're paying into a capital reserve fund. And so they maintain that capital. So, if we don't, usually when we don't spend money, we save money, it falls back to the good, right, at the end of an appropriation cycle, at the end of a fiscal year. Through the lease agreements, we were requiring, and they're requiring, that they be able to take a portion of that lease payment and set it aside and build up a capital reserve fund so that you can take care of some of these regularly anticipated major projects. So when it comes to painting the school, replacing air conditioners, minor to major systems, addressing unanticipated circumstances that might arise, there's resources immediately available to them that aren't normally available to us, because we don't have a reserve fund of extra money that we can set aside and carry over and build to address those needs. So that's a great question, and is exactly why, we struggle, because you look at their structure, they've got I think JFK build up to $1 million. I know GEF will build up to $1 million in capital reserves, and then it's just waiting for, what needs to be fixed. And so that's a luxury that we don't have, in our side.
Okay, so I believe what you're asking us is looking for solutions in that line, because we know our maintenance capability with the government of Guam and the buildings, no matter if it be DOE or other facilities, even vehicles, we struggle with that. So if we're going to put the money into the schools, then we need to have some sort of private-public partnership where we can assist, so you folks can focus on the 14 points, and especially number 12, to make sure our schools are safe by gaining assistance through the public-private partnerships, whatever we can do. And then eventually, as our economy grows better, then maybe we can look at something else. But for now, we have a lot of work to do.
Right. I think you're right on with regard to that a potential solution. I think the other issue is that just structurally, we're not set up to take savings and deposit into in a fund. They end up going to pay other needs elsewhere in the government, elsewhere in the agency. So even the incentive to save and set aside, it's hard to maintain that because there's so many other needs that compete against it. So when it comes to the lease schools, there are bond covenants, there are, investor requirements, there's, the lease that sets aside how these funds are going to be used. And the legislature, the government, we pay that right off the top because it's a contractual obligation. Those lease payments get made on October 15th. They're set, they're done, they're set aside. Don't worry about it the rest of the year. The lease school administrators, they don't bug me because they go right to their landlord, and they pretty much are reporting a good turnaround and response. But again, the resources are there to be had. So any way we can move in that direction would be great.
I'd like to continue to help you with that, but thank you.
Simon Sanchez will be set up the same way. So that's relief for that.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Amanda Sheldon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, Madam Chairwoman, and all of your administrators, the school principals who are here today. Thank you for taking the time to be here to answer the questions about the budget. While we're on the covered walkways, I do recall in 2018 there was some federal funding given for walkways at different schools. I'm wondering if all of those monies have been expended and those projects are complete now?
Correct. So the fundings that were set aside, you talking about the federal funds? Yes, those are exactly. I mean, it's we're lucky and grateful to have that as a resource because, again, it's the only major source of capital funding that we have to tackle those big projects. And again, those projects range from $100,000 to $500,000, and we just don't have that kind of money just set aside to address one school when we have 41 schools that are all seeking assistance. So yes, those are being put to use. They're under the auspices of DOI, so they're checking in on the use of those funds, and there's also consultants that they've hired to work with us to ensure that we have the support needed.
Okay, glad to
Thank you.
hear that. Thank you very much. I'm looking at points, of the 14 points, points number 5 and 4, point 5, the certified allied health professionals, and I see in your breakdown that these allied health professionals are psychologists, speech clinicians, and also the school counselors and licensed practitioners, nurses. I'm wondering, how are all of these split up between the schools? Are each school is sharing these professionals?
Well, for the school health counselors, we have coverage at every school. So there are nurses that are assigned to support each school. So we're very proud that we've been able to staff those positions. And they are coordinated through support from the central office. So there is, Julieta Kaneni is our supervisor there who works with the nurses to coordinate them, ensure that coverage is provided when someone's absent or sick, and provides for professional development as well. For the allied health professionals, those are more centralized. Mostly they service either student support or special education. Those are sometimes they're hard to recruit. As you know, there are shortages in some of these professions, but those will be more central, and then we'll support the schools as they can.
And the numbers here, this would be to meet the bare minimum for these points, right?
So yes, well the certified school health counselors does our interpretation of that is every school is going to have one.
Yes.
So definitely that's why the number is much higher for that.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator Lee.
Senator Smasi, Mr. Chair, thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent and Madam Chair, for joining us, as well as all the members of the GDOE Familia who are here. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon. Mr. Superintendent, I do want to just thank you very much for your support and for being a stakeholder in our efforts to expand youth mental health first aid, and your commitment to including that as part of the training, as incorporating it into your faculty professional development days. And so I just wanted to see how that effort is going.
We can provide a follow-up as to how many trainings have happened, but I can assure you, because our deputy, Kelly Sokola, who's here, is actually one of our trainers. And Dr. Sokola, as well as, again, our team at DOE working with behavioral health. So it's almost a train-to-trainer setup, but then they are conducting mental health first aid for schools. It's quite a lengthy training. I mean, they need to put in a significant number of hours to ensure that they're able to receive the full training and certification. So the only way we can really do that is to try to kind of set aside a professional development days to get that done. So I think, as we've discussed this before, it'll take time to really get to everyone that we can. But I do want to echo that it is important. And the reason I realized it didn't come from the central office saying you need to have mental health first aid training. It actually came from teachers who said, can we get some of this, because we see these issues in our classroom. Yeah. How can we identify and seek support on behalf of our students? So actually, I think teachers have been requesting and demanding for that type of support, and so this happened to be very timely.
Great, I'm really happy to hear that. Just for your information, we are considering maybe 2 proposals regarding a styrofoam ban for government of Guam, leading into a potential island-wide ban. And so I just wanted to ask, maybe not today, but if you could please provide the committee in advance of our budget hearings how that might estimate an estimated impact to GDOE if we were to ban the use of styrofoam or use any GovGuam funds to procure styrofoam. If you could just give us an update on that, just so we can have an idea. And then also just wanted to give you an opportunity. I'm sure members of the committee would be interested in hearing just a quick update on the procurement of a new Simon Sanchez facility. I know that $500,000 was allocated for this year, and so just wanted $5,000, I think, again for the next year. And I just wanted to verify if this money has been made available to GDOE, and if so, how is it used?
So very quickly on the issue of a styrofoam ban, we'll be happy to do that research and see whether there is going to be any impact. I do want to assure you, we worked, the governor asked me to serve on one of the committees, to lead one of the committees under the Green Growth Initiative, working with Dr. Shelton over at the University of Guam. And so we're really exploring what that partnership could look like. We know we have a lot of students interested in, practicing or entering careers in this area. And we're tasked with looking at what might we do on the curriculum side to promote, island sustainability. And also, I think the challenge for us is to look operationally. Are there things that we can do operationally, because we're such a huge impact? I mean, such a huge agency that any little thing we can do will have a huge impact. So I did sit down with Dr. Shelton to kind of, seek his input too, and help us through this process as we work, in tandem with other agencies. I'd like to see us be a leader, and also showcase to our students what it means to practice sustainability. So hopefully we can see more progress in the year ahead.
Thank you. And then Simon Sanchez update.
Simon Sanchez, we're in the middle of the procurement, but I can say that where we're at is, in this process, because it's an RFP process, we basically do evaluate an evaluation. We work with the highest qualified offerer, and then we negotiate from there. So I can say that we're looking forward to negotiations taking place over the next couple of weeks, and then hopefully moving into a contract phase. So again, this is toward the end of February, trying to complete it the next couple of weeks, and then move to contract formation. And once that's secured, we want to bring those that firm to Simon Sanchez and start the dialogue with the stakeholders. Let them know we're ready to talk about the vision forward and not the issues that we faced in the past with regard to things getting stuck. So we're looking forward to moving that into the next phase. I think once that's done, you're going to be several months before we start looking at bidding out construction management and preparing for the financing and construction of the school. So one thing I do want to bring for the record to the committee's attention is that there is money set aside in the Makahat Act that it basically commits the $5.1 million to the Simon Sanchez project. My understanding is when we get to that, when we get to the point where we are able to secure an agreement and to make the pledge of those resources, we want those resources to be available. So we are hoping to do that in this coming fiscal year, make that pledge. So we ask the committee to make sure the funding is available when it's time to sign on the dotted line. So we just flag that. We don't need it right now, but we're looking forward to getting that solicitation done, and then we don't want to turn around and say there's no funding available.
Well, we can certainly work to appropriate that, but
Right.
in terms of actual cash, that's
Right.
another branch. So
Right.
we're happy. I'm sure everyone here is a huge advocate of that, and we'll work with you to make sure that money, the actual cash, is in the bank and ready for you to utilize it.
My understanding is that when a lease is done, it's going to have to come back here to legislature anyway. So at that point, again, we're hoping to do that within the next fiscal year. We'll hit that point and see whether we're able to move forward.
Well, I know I speak for the chair and for the oversight chair and probably all the senators here that we're really eager to
Yes.
review that and get it moving.
Thanks.
Just another quick question. $540,000 for Chamorro Affairs, $500,000 for Simon Sanchez and other facilities, which were allocated from your main appropriation this year, are now being offered as a separate appropriation in the governor's request. So how would this quote unquote freed up $1.4 million be utilized within GDOE?
I'll have to take a look at that and get back to you on that notion.
Right. Senator Shelton, you missed a question. You wanted
Thank
to
you
ask?
very much. Earlier today, some of the senators here signed a One World, One Step clean water plastic pledge, a single-use plastic pledge. And these are, I don't know if you're familiar with the students who are a nonprofit organization giving out the refillable water stations to some of the public schools. One of the struggles that they shared with us today is that they've given the actual water station a few months ago, but they have not been installed in the schools. And I was wondering if there is a holdup or if there are additional resources needed to install them.
Yeah, let me take a look. I was in the warehouse. I knew there was a few that were still there, but I know that others have been installed. So I'll see what the holdup is, because we are getting good feedback from the ones that are installed. And for those senators who are not aware, this is basically, it's like a water fountain, but you go there and bring your flask or whatever it is and refill it. At least the reports I'm getting is that the kids enjoy it. It's much better than the traditional water fountain, and they're utilizing it. Mm-hmm. So let me take a look and get back to you to make sure that's installed or what the holdup is. But just the other day I was saying we need more of these. Mm-hmm. If the kids are actually using it, it helps them be hydrated, helps them get the water they need. And I don't think any of us likes the old model of water fountains from decades before. So
Definitely.
it's great that that we were able to receive that support and pilot that in some of our schools.
Yes, okay,
So-
thank you. We look forward to that information.
Thank you. Senator Terlai. Senator Reese, do you have any questions, ma'am? Sure. Then we'll work towards me.
All right. Thank you again to everyone here and to those presenting testimony. Mr. Superintendent, does this budget for 2021, does it include a JP Torres type of school to be reinstated? An alternative school?
No. Well, there is support for the existing program. There is some local funding that goes into supporting some of the costs associated with the JP Torres as is, which is credit recovery. But I think you're asking for back to the...
We're talking about the success, what do you call it now?
Yeah, primarily...
That's a different, isn't it that a different
Right.
program?
The JP Torres is now the JP Torres Success Academy, and we've expanded that. It's a credit recovery school, mostly
Right.
federally funded,
Okay, so
but some local
All
component.
right, so I understand the credit recovery school, that's continuing, correct?
Yes.
But I'm talking about what used to be done in the JP Torres alternative school. I guess those with discipline issues, I just wanted to know if that was being considered, if you were considering reinstating something like that, or are you going to keep those at all the various schools?
So so we have a couple of, I'd say, critical meetings that are happening around this same discussion. So around high school, my assessment is that we've created, several opportunities and pathways that students who are, in this category are able to take advantage of, and we're continuing to work on that side. But there are some who are eligible for credit recovery, and they're able to take part in JP Torres as it's structured today. So these are kids who face expulsion or have been, disciplined for some act and been determined that they probably shouldn't be on the main campus. We are, this year through our federal programs, we were able to provide more independent pathways to getting your credits through us MUJAL. So we're offering, so we cover the students' costs to be able to go to us MUJAL. And so for some of those who are in trouble, we offer them that option to continue. We are working with, with creating more online opportunities that if you are separated from the main population, but you're able to continue working what we call an e-campus, we think that for the older students who are in trouble but can take advantage of more independent learning opportunities, that we can continue to service them. The critical issue that we're having trouble with is, not trouble, it's just we're struggling with the middle school population. So what happens to kids who are in that particular situation in terms of committing violent acts, or their behavioral situation is so dire that we don't want to see them, we want to see them separated from the main population for some period of time. We had an arrangement with DYA that we thought that we could support them in their communities at the DYA learning centers, our community centers, working with the teacher and DYA staff, and we structured an MOU around that. But I think we mutually agree that is not sustainable. It's not really working the way we intended. We set up opportunity rooms for the various schools, but we realize as well that not every school is able to maintain that or have a teacher always in place. So, we are meeting with the courts to kind of have this discussion, because we deal a lot with kids who are court ordered or dealing with, with the judicial system, trying to figure out, if they're middle school, trying to figure out what those alternatives are. The courts are upset that there doesn't seem to be a robust solution yet. So we're working with them to figure out what might work for that age group. And we're going to be meeting with the Lieutenant Governor and DYA to also talk about our partnership. I think what we'd like to do is utilize our resources. We know we work at DYA. For those who are over at the DYA facility, they get to learn and to have classes. But if you're not quite adjudicated and you're kind of in the middle, we don't have that same level of support. So we'd like to explore that model and see if we can build around the Lihing Famaguan and do things that are at the community center, but with more dedicated teaching and learning occurring than we've currently been able to support. So I think the idea is we do believe there should be some separation from the main body of students for safety issues. We have to provide we want to provide an alternate learning environment, and we're hoping that DYA will work with us to find that solution. Right now, we decided that the current arrangement is not effective. So I think, and the other thing we'd like to do is, in looking at other best practices, at the middle school level, we don't want to write the kids off and say, you're adults and you got to face significant consequences. So, and if you have any ideas along those lines, we'd appreciate it. But I think mentoring for this age group would also be an effective, strategy in trying to get them back on, in good conduct and good grace with their schools. It requires that extra time and attention. So again, that's just something we want to work on and see if we can provide that alternate learning environment, dedicated teacher, as well as a mentoring component.
All right, thank you. And but then for the high school, where you currently have a JP Torres Success Academy, but isn't it the policy that those with disciplinary or safety issues, that's not what that school's for right now? Those are currently kept in the high schools, and the principals are dealing with those types of instances?
Right. So there are students, whether they're in the courts or whether they've been expelled from school, when they come to see me, they might, asking for reconsideration. If they meet the criteria for credit recovery and they can demonstrate a commitment to taking advantage of a second chance, they are eligible to participate. Typically when students are recruited for JP Torres, they go through an interview process to make sure that, your transportation issues, you've got a handle on it, you're ready to come and attend school. So I think we have the administrators who've been a part of that program. What we'll do is we'll say, here's a student. We're asking that you interview them, and see if they meet the credit criteria, and then if they have an opportunity, they can participate in that way.
Yeah, I understand that program is very successful, and we've been to many of the graduations, and you've discussed this program with us. My concern was in the regular schools, your ability to maintain safety and discipline, that type of thing, and the burden that it's putting on the principals, when we've got these large populations. I was just I wanted to hear about that.
Yeah, so the high schools are tough. I mean, after this last year, we were talking about violent activity. We told the principals that if you feel strongly, based on their disciplinary history or based on the severity of the incident, you can and ought to make use of your expulsion authority, so that we can identify the breadth of this issue and then look at options and alternatives for those students. Particularly, you don't have to, keep them if you feel like they're a danger. I mean, what's interesting is that DYA is citing the statistics where they're seeing less, young people over there in their facility. It means that they're still in our schools. So we did say that, expulsion is an option. But again, for those students who are expelled, we do want to see whether they might, if they're interested and they're capable of saying, look, I will demonstrate my commitment. I meet the credit recovery criteria. Can I do that? We'll explore that option. Again, as Mujao is another one. Look, I got all these issues at home, but I still want to continue. We'll say if you want to do it on your own schedule, we have federal funding dedicated to this program. If you are able to take advantage of that, and that might be a more productive way for you to continue learning. So the high schools seem to have more options at this point, which was our primary concern. But the middle schools,
students perhaps, but my question is more geared toward high school principals.
Right.
Do they feel like this is working for them the way that it's set up now, where the discipline is not referred anywhere else? It's pretty much kept there with them. They're going to deal with it, and
well, for the most part,
and they're said, expulsion is like the
right. That's the most severe. Yeah. Well, I would say that I don't know. I feel like I'm dating myself. Today's kids are not like the kids from yesterday, but I would say that there are challenges on campus. Most of the supports that our administrators are looking for are staff supports, right? So I think having more school aides on campus. What was it really?
So does this budget incorporate that?
Yeah, it
additional
does.
school
It
aides?
does.
It does for the high schools?
Correct. For all schools, but high schools especially.
Okay, I'm going to move on to some other questions. At one of the testimonies, or maybe last budget cycle when we were here, you said that the conditions for that they might be removed in December, and that then, we're looking at getting the 2.5 million that you're currently spending for that third party. I think I heard you talk about the progress, but were the conditions removed in December?
Okay, so I'll have to go back to the timeline. So this has been a year, so from this last December, this last year, 2019, has been a lot of work put into completing what we call the reconsideration evaluation plan. So that was really the January to December timeline for trying to complete every last bit of requirement. Right. As part of that, we had 7 conditions that were placed,
yes,
special conditions. So prior to January, as we were negotiating through this rep, we asked for removal of some of the conditions that seemed to have been met already. And so in March, we were provided removal of, there were 3 conditions that were removed.
Yes, we were updated with
right.
that.
So there were 4 remaining.
And then you talked about...
This summer, a 4th one was validated to have been addressed, which had to do with submission of our timely audits. So there are actually 3 conditions that remain. And those involve the requirement to
yes,
complete...
but weren't there some that you were expecting to also be removed just last month, or December? 2 months ago?
In December, what we had hoped was, as we worked through this process, that they would come immediately to do the validation. So we would complete in December, and they would show up. So they did commit to February. I know our Vice Speaker was there with us. They committed to February. They called us and said that due to their conflicts and scheduling conflicts, it would have to be April. Our Vice Chair on the board sent a letter to the Assistant Secretary expressing the board's concern and that there was a pushback of the visit, and really pushing the Assistant Secretary to maintain his commitment to getting that visit done. So it wasn't to our delay. It was really, we anticipated that we'd finish in December, they would come in February, and at this point we'd be discussing the results of their visit.
All right, and then I just wanted to follow up on the Simon Sanchez questions. As you know, we were already at an award phase for the Simon Sanchez project, and then it was, they objected to it, so there was a controversy, and then it was put aside. But at that point, what money was going to fund that award for the construction?
So at that point, the project was a design-build project, which meant everything was wrapped into,
yes,
one project, one vendor. And so the source of funding would have been the $5.1 million set aside in Makahat. It would have been executed through a lease agreement, and then they would commence to do all of the work from land surveying to design.
Right.
To
so
construction.
5.1 from where?
It was the Makahat. Is that TEF?
Yes, right? It is TEF.
TEF, correct.
So it's 5.1 from TEF.
That would have been
currently, we're not setting that money aside, although we were supposed to be spending it by now. We are not setting it aside. We're spending it on DOE, in many, I think that's what's going on. And so this money was supposed to take care of Simon Sanchez and also the other schools that needed repair. There's that whole, that's how that was supposed to happen. And so that set aside was supposed to take place a long time ago. Unfortunately, it looks to me like now we're spending this TEF money as we go along, and we're not, that's why you're saying when we come back, we're going to have to, refind it, or, I don't know, cut budgets to procure that. But I'm thinking we should, if you're planning to do the construction this year, then you should build it into your budget. I mean, it should be, $5 million from, DOE, that the TEF,
Right.
because the TEF's dedicated to you. And so I guess I just wanted to then just go over, was it 2017 when the authority was shifted over to DOE?
Is it possible for me to answer the TEF question? Because I think that was a real, I think I made the point earlier that if you go back several years, we're actually looking at upwards of $15 to $20 million in the TEF shortfall that was promised to DOE. So I wouldn't agree that we've been spending it. So I would say, though, that the TEF funding, the critical piece there is to determine whether or not there is adequate amounts being collected in TEF to support the government operations as well as a project that it was intended for. So I think there might have been an anticipated major increase in TEF that may or may not be realized. So I think that's the issue. It was that 5.1 was deemed to be additional money that would, I think, generated by this revaluation exercise and not coming from an operating budget.
Right,
So,
back then they revaluated, and then recently the taxes were raised on properties over $1 million, and we're still getting a lot of flack for that, but that money is
Correct.
supposed to be dedicated for these purposes. And
Correct,
so
but I
was
wanna
it
say that we-
2017 when the authority shifted over? And I just want to, just very quickly, I'm almost done, 2017, is that correct? When the
I
authority
bel-
shifted,
yeah,
when
I think it was mid
the
2018.
authority shifted from the committee comprised of DPW, DOE, and can't remember who the third one was, but over to DOE exclusively.
I believe it was mid 2018.
18, yeah, during the 34th Guam legislature, and then the project manager has been hired. And how much did that cost? What do you call him, the project manager?
There's no project manager has been hired.
Or what do you call what was the last procurement that you did for Simon Sanchez?
The land survey,
How much did that cost?
100,000 or a little bit less.
And so that's all we've done?
So we received the, okay, I don't know, I guess I would have to pull up some of our old testimony before the legislature because, first of all, we did receive authority in mid-2018. As you know, when something's under protest, nobody is allowed to move forward until that protest is resolved. At that time, there was no public auditor in place because it had been vacated by Doris Brooks, I guess, as she was running for office. So nobody could take the role of the public auditor at such time as a public auditor was then elected, and that was Speaker Cruz. Upon his election and settling into office, they had to then dispose of the matters before them.
Yes, I just wanted to know the date.
Well, I just want to go to the time frame so that there isn't the impression that DOE was not moving forward.
But it was-
In November, I think
We're just trying to go over the time frame. Yeah, so if it's 2018, that's all I need to know, right?
Right, but I said that we didn't have the authority, in fact, in truth, to move forward until after the OPA had disposed of that matter.
Yes,
So
I
which would
understand.
put us at the end of 2018 into 2019.
All right. And so over the course of 2019, we've procured the land surveyor and you've surveyed the land.
Correct.
Now, you've already gone through the RFP, or the
So
RFP's out. You're
we-
saying you're about to negotiate on this?
So we issued an RFP for land surveying, and that work was
This is for-
completed. That was
No,
completed.
that's done already, right?
Right, but I
Land
want to.
surveyor's done.
But I want to say the time frame for that was to complete in August, over the summer. So that land survey is now done in August. And so the intent was then to issue out the solicitation for the design phase. So that solicitation did not go out until December. So between August and December, I was here before the legislature letting you know that there was a funding gap. And so that funding gap, we wanted to see if we could resolve. As part of that discussion around the funding gap, we received an unsolicited proposal to see if there were alternate ways of financing. We spent time, because we knew that there weren't immediate resources available, to evaluate that unsolicited proposal, but it proved to not be legally feasible. And so we had to reject the unsolicited proposal, and we then move forward with the solicitation for the design phase. That went out in December, and we received the proposals at the end of January, and have proceeded into the evaluation phase, and that evaluation phase will then lead into a negotiation phase that we hope we can conclude towards the end of February into early March. Once that's complete, we will then go into the contract formation phase, which then requires, our approval, then to the Attorney General, then to the Governor, and then once the Governor signs off, that vendor then can proceed to, begin the work.
All right, so when you issued the RFP for the engineer architect in December, or you said, was it, you're expecting?
It was in December. yes.
December, all right, and then how are you going to pay that? I know that you have an estimate here. You say you
Right.
estimate this phase to cost
So-
$5 million.
Right, we estimated that the costs for A&E would fall between 5 to 10% of the
Yeah, so
anticipated
what did you budget
development
to
costs.
pay that with?
So we came to the legislature and asked that we identify funding to, for $4 million. The governor, subsequent to that, committed 1.1, and that leaves $2.9 million that needs to be funded. Vice Speaker Nelson and Senator San Augustine have both
Those are
been working
bills.
to try to get $2.9
Right,
million
But what did you set
available.
aside? Because you already sent out the RFP. This is why I'm asking the question. It's
The-
already been sent out. You're supposed to
Correct.
be negotiating, and yeah.
So we
You're
have
gonna
identified
put that on
possible
hold?
sources of funding, but at the time that we issue the contract, the law requires that we certify funding at that point. So the whole discussion we've been having with the legislature for the past 5-6 months has been, what are the sources of revenue? And because our board has given us the authority to eat into our FY20 appropriation if needed, although we prefer that we find some other source of revenue. So I know that Senator San Augustine and Vice Speaker Nelson have been leading that discussion to find that, to see if that $2.9 million can be taken from the surplus funding and dedicated to the project to fill that gap.
Right. But you also did tell us at one point that you might take it out of your own funding
We have
because you
that,
wanted to move
right.
forward, and
We
that
have
was
that
an
authority.
urgent, and then the governor gave you $1 million, and so we asked you would it could be possible that you could just move forward with that amount. I mean, is it necessary that we're going to project to your potential contractor that, we're going to give you up to $5.5 million? And you told us how you came up with that number, but still,
Yes.
we're talking about this is the money that we need for the construction. It's the same money.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
so the more savings that we can get, if we could have negotiated it for less, that's we're
Right.
hoping we're going to get.
So we're in the middle of trying to negotiate, of getting to that negotiation stage, so hopefully we can, get to a good amount. I think I said that the Guam Education Board did authorize us, if needed, to use our current appropriation to fund the design phase if needed. But, we recognize this as an important project. So as we track the $19 million in reductions that GDOE has already had to endure since the end of 2017, to ask us to take another $2.9 million, I think, would be difficult. I'd like to ask the legislature.
For FY 2019, have you received all of your appropriations?
No.
So is that the same amount that you did not pay to the vendors? So are those the same amounts
Yes,
we're
the
talking about?
same amount we've been discussing, the $2.1 million in TEF
That's
is
what you're
actually
getting
the critical short
Short
from,
2.5,
19.
2
Correct.
million, 2.1 or 2.1
2.1 for
TEF,
TEF.
and that's what you didn't pay vendors.
Well, that made it difficult for us to keep up with all the vendors, so we tried to keep up, but we're 2.1 short, and that was, so it's impacting our vendor payables.
All right. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how that happens, that the, I guess we'll save that for when BBMR is in front of us, because when they're here, they always tell us that they are giving you your full allotment, and I guess when TEF's short, they're not covering that from anywhere else, and now that's
Right.
going to add to our deficit. All right.
Yeah, they've paid us all of most of the general fund from 19. It's really the TEF that's the significant shortfall, and the reason we're getting is that because they didn't collect. They didn't collect the projected amount that they were initially expecting in TEF. So we
All right.
bore the $2.1 million of that shortfall.
All right. But your solicitations of the vendors, then you've been able to certify those just based on the appropriation amounts from TEF versus your receipts from the TEF?
Correct.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Muñoz, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Fernandez, and your staff, and the board, and all the teachers and principals that are here today. Hopefully my question or concern won't make you sweat too much today. So I've been actively assisting public health and some of the nonprofit organizations in the administration of the HPV vaccines into the schools, and I want to commend Estumbo Middle School today for being a part of that I think they're on their second round, which is even great. So, and I really feel like we're probably not moving as fast as we should as far as administering these vaccines, which HPV, as everyone knows, is the vaccine, or the virus rather, is a cause of 6 cancers. So that's one of my biggest passions, and hopefully we can move a lot quicker with this. Now, my question is GDOE capable of accommodating the public health for the administration of these vaccines? And I see that there's a slight increase in your 0.5 and a major increase in 0.12 in your budget requests. And I'm wondering if any of that administration of these vaccines are included in your budget requests.
First of all, thank you, Senator Munoz, for being a leader in that area. And I think it's really been nice to see. I think you phrased it as not enough being done, but I told our nurses that from where we were before to the number of PV vaccinations that we've been able to do, let's take advantage. I mean, let's shine light on that progress and then build around that, because I didn't know much about HPV before, but the fact that it is an indicator of potential risk for other cancers later in life, that means that we can impact the long-term health of our kids through the HPV vaccination. I think the issue, of course, is educating our parents and our students and working with our nurses. So I'm happy to continue to work with you. And the partners to ensure that we build upon the progress in getting these vaccines administered at school. I'm supportive of it. I think because it's happening at school, we have a captive population that's there.
Yes.
If we're able to serve them. So if there are any obstacles and issues that we need to address, I'm happy to engage. I know that we've just been piloting the last couple of years, and so I'm sure we've learned what works, what doesn't work, and if we can improve what we're doing, then I'm happy to help.
I think one of the main concerns when we did have a meeting with the nurses, that there was a lack of school nurses, and they would have to share amongst the schools. So I was just wondering if you said you're reaching for the stars in your budget, that if you were actively including some nurses in your budget as well.
Well, that might have been at a time when we were seeing some vacancies, but I think we pretty much have been able to stabilize our nursing corps. Supplies are always critical, and again, we receive supplies from some of our HPV partners. They've come in and given the nurses. They appreciate that. I think part of the issue is at school, during the course of a school day, sometimes there's things happening, and it's hard to structure that extra time to do the vaccinations and get all the paperwork done and so forth. But like I said, I understand we've been doing this a couple of years now, and so maybe it's time to take a look at the improvements to the process to smooth it out so that every school can benefit from that learning. But I know I've been to some schools where there wasn't as much response, and then other schools have reported much more willingness to
and that's where
participate.
the public information campaign should come out. And so however way you need us to assist that in that area, please let us know. And
I think if you talk to our nursing supervisor and our nurses, there is an interest in, again, this is wishing for the stars, but building capacity to support school-based health centers or health clinics where we can do some of this work, whether it's giving physicals, immunizing our kids and so forth, at a school setting. It doesn't have to be every school, but maybe 2 or 3 across the island. And if we get, if the Medicaid funding stream continues to be favorable past the 2 years that the match has been, adjusted, there might be opportunities for us to participate and provide some local and federal funding to support that effort.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you again to the staff and the nurses for helping this area.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Paris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone who's out here today, giving your time. So I just have questions regarding your testimony, Superintendent. So in regards to the Adequate Education Act, you list down a number of positions for each category, and I just wanted to know what percentage, are they all in-house, or are there some attributed to contractors?
These are all locally funded. Under FTEs, those are just locally funded positions, correct?
Are they hired by DOE, or are you attributing some of those to contract work?
No, contractual services would be a different category.
Okay. In regards to those positions, what percentage are vacancies that have not been filled, and what percentage of those are new positions?
So, let me just, do you mind if I just pull it up? So,
You know the answer.
I think, Mr. Superintendent, I asked that and you were going to get back so we can
so
tweak that.
okay, you want the vacancies and the new, so I think we have about 390 new positions that were proposed in the budget. So those new positions are not what you're asking about existing vacant positions?
No, Mr. Superintendent, you started with new positions in 2020, you're
Yes.
at 353. 2021, you're asking for 390.
Right.
And then on your field position, I think that's what Senator Perez asking. In 2020, you filled 202,542, which is actually less than what you asked for in 2019.
Right.
So that when we start to try to balance the numbers, and I think that's what she was leaning to, is trying to get some comfortable number of where you're at.
Right, so we can produce the number of vacancies. At the point in time that we were looking at the budget development, it was about 429 positions vacant.
Okay. The other thing with instructional days, so you have listed 142 FTEs. Which divisions are they found in? Which divisions of DOE are they?
So
can we
most of
find them?
those are your central office positions that support the ongoing operations of the school system. So again, like, yeah, you're right, central office, so payroll, procurement, HR, property management, and so forth. So I don't know if I have the break. We have a, no, these are the 180 instructional days. So these are mostly your central office, what we call administrative overhead, for running the operation over the 12 months of the year.
Okay, so if I can get a list of the divisions.
Sure.
Do you have that list? That'd be
Okay.
great, thank you. The other thing that you mentioned was, one thing I wanted to ask about was contractual changes. So I was looking over just what happened between 2019 and 2020. I see some huge jumps. And when you look forward to 2020 and 2021, they're pretty much stable. But I just wanted to ask, regarding 2019 and 2020, if you can speak to the changes in the different divisions. So I'm seeing FSAIS, the contractual change was from 38,000 to 1.8 million. So I'm just wondering, what was the reason for the increase?
Sorry, which schedule are you looking at, or?
FSAIS, so that division.
Okay. You're asking why the increase in the proposed contractual, or?
Or just going back, I just wanted to just kind of get an idea of what caused that change from 38,000 to 1.8 million. I mean, I have a list here, and perhaps we can, I can maybe send
I
you
just
the
want to make
list.
sure I'm looking at the right information. I'm asking staff to point it out.
So I'm looking at contracts, specifically contracts.
Ma'am, if we could, Senator, if we could flag that and come, I'm not sure we're
Okay.
looking at the
So
same
yeah,
information.
There's several facilities and management, food and nutrition, CIP,
Correct.
internal audit, Chamorro division. I see a significant change in what was contractually done. So it'd be nice to see what the reason for that was. If we can get that information later.
Okay.
Another thing was, so you'd mentioned that you get 3.3 million a week, right, in cash? Let me just go back to that. 3.65 million a week. So the calculation, it goes up to 189.8 million. And I know we appropriated 219 million. So what was that difference? What was that used for?
From
So
this
according to
budget?
the last year's budget,
last year's budget?
budget was 219 million, and you were saying that as far as cash goes, we basically you receive 3.65 million on a
Right.
weekly basis. So I guess they're short then about 20, 30 million in that
That's
case.
that's for pay, right, so payroll. So right then, so I think right on top of that, we would include the utilities as the, as a major addition to the 189,000. Yes, yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking. So so with the 3.65 is what we get on a weekly basis. It adds up to 189 million. Predominantly, that covers, our personnel costs as much as possible, and then everything left over, we would essentially go to the main contract. So Sodexo is a major contract, air conditioning with a vendor is a major contract, GPA, GWA are major vendors, and that's where the bulk of that goes. And then the smaller vendors that you see are, there's a lot of them, but they're not, there's a few major contractors, a third-party fiduciary as well.
Okay.
And
So-
right there, you'll eat up the rest of the, much of the budget.
So the increase that you're asking for, that would go towards capital improvement as part of it. And then what are the other things that you would like to see the funding for?
Right. So based on, a lot of the increased, so at the school level, a lot of the increases that are being proposed at the school level have to do with, a lot of it has to do with staffing. Much of that comes from the CBA formula. So they'll look at the CBAs and they'll realize that we don't have, these positions in place. And if not, they're proposing adding the resources needed to hire those positions. So you'll see library techs are an important category, clerks, and so forth. You'll see schools adding more positions because, due to requests for more school aides. So that'll come from the personnel side. The contractual side is usually handled at the central level. It's negotiated, a school-wide procurement. But the schools will then spend most of their time of their request looking at what their needs are in terms of facility improvements and equipment. So collateral equipment is a major need for the elementary schools, playground equipment on top of that, and then other major facility needs, whether it's repair of a room or expansion of a cafeteria or so forth. So at the school level, that's the type of new requests that were going to be common in the budget. At the division level, you'll see some requests for personnel. I mean, we've already shown that we tried to hold off on the need for more, on hiring the existing positions, which is why the vacancies show so high. Other than that, again, it's mostly going to be the capital and the staffing driving the increases. The textbooks would be the only other piece. Now, we typically get $1.5 million for textbooks. And again, we had that discussion last time, and part of why the board has included it in full is the legislature's asked us to ask for it. So we want to make sure we put it in there, but we recognize that we are not getting $17 million. We're more likely to try to figure out how to make do with $1 to $2 million on an annual basis.
Yeah, I noticed some of the new positions is the teacher for coordinators, teacher for teacher assistants for Aspire. So that's like I think that's a new thing, right? So what was I can understand the rationale, but
Yeah.
I'd just like to hear from you the reason for that.
No, I mean, the TAs have really been, the teacher assistants have really been, have really gotten positive reactions from our school. I mean, obviously extra assistants in the classroom for teachers. We look at them as aspiring teachers perhaps, and we can get them on an educator track. A lot of them are federally funded, so you'll see the schools requesting for TAs as an additional support. So not just to be in the classroom, but of course, when you're short elsewhere, you have enough staff to be able to cover your responsibilities.
And as far as the teacher for Aspire, that program.
Yeah, Aspire is mostly funded with federal funds, but so I'm not sure what you're asking.
Yeah, in the budget, it lists down new positions as
Yeah.
teacher for Aspire coordinators and tutors, I believe.
Right. Well, these requests are coming from those individual schools who want to see more personnel on campus. So I'd have to go back and go back to which schools are requesting those particular positions.
Another thing is retirement. So do you have a gauge on what percentage of the staff in DOE is set to retire in the near future?
I don't have that number. I think we might be able to pull that number together with HR as to anticipated retirements. I think it would be significant coming upon, these next few years government-wide. So we can provide that information and try to get that to the committee. You're asking for our projection
Yes, yeah,
for retire.
yeah,
Okay,
as far as like the number of years they've served and
right. Okay.
based on that,
Kind of looking at numbers who've been 25, 30, and 30
that-
years.
I think that would help with perhaps planning for the next stage.
Yes. No, absolutely. No, that's a good suggestion.
Another thing is a youth risk assessment survey that was done. I think some of the numbers are pretty staggering in regards to how many students have been exposed to drugs or using drugs. What is the plan to address that? And is it in this budget?
The plan to address,
The amount of drug use in the school system?
I think a lot of that has to do with just supervision on campus. There's so many kids and there's so many staff available to keep an eye on what kids are doing. I think one of the challenges that we have, it depends what kind of drugs you're talking about. One of the concerns that we have right now and this year especially has been alcohol. If that's included in your categorization of drugs, I think alcohol has been a big challenge, especially this year. We've seen some of the riots and fights that seem to stem from kids being able to drink all weekend or try to bring alcohol on campus and so forth. So we're trying to work with our partner agencies to see what we can do to mitigate that. Our schools have struggled with strategies. Some of them have said, can we just ban all, like hydro flasks or bottles coming on campus as one, and of course you're punishing everybody for the acts of a few. We are, I guess there's some talk about regulating the sale of alcohol more strictly to ensure that kids aren't able to purchase or people aren't able to purchase at certain hours when schools are in operation, those types of strategies. So alcohol, I think, would be part of our, probably our major focus if we were trying to address the issues that are on campus today. The money the only money we've kind of put in there is really around more, additional personnel to help keep eyes on what's going on around campus. So a lot of the school aid support you're seeing is really to increase supervision. We do have, it hasn't cost us, maybe it's incorporated as a minor, given the scale of the budget, a minor amount, but we do have substance abuse intervention that we've piloted within our schools. So that's really under the auspices of our school psychologists section, working with our school counselors. So we do work on interventions on campus with our secondary schools so that we can put our kids through that type of intervention program, substance abuse, brief tobacco interventions, and so forth. But again, that's not at a scale that's going to reach all the kids that you really want to reach. It really is targeted towards those who've been caught. They're at risk of discipline. We want to leverage that discipline to have them participate in intervention. And then we're still in the early stages of seeing, whether that's going to have a lasting effect on our kids.
So as far as, what would that look like for increasing the FTEs on that? What's the number? Is there a number that we can
Well, it
follow
really
up
has to
with?
come down to, it's a tough one because we're really talking about school psychologists and counselors working together. So if you're talking about increasing personnel, it's going to be around those areas. But, I think for us, we're trying to figure out how many school psychologists can we really hire and support, given all the other needs of the school system. That's why we're looking at, developing more school-based strategies and then understanding, where our partners like behavioral health and others, come in. So if we were to just do it as a school-based program, I'm sure our psychologists would want more support to be able to provide more of these sessions for our kids.
Okay. In your testimony, you stated that you would ask the legislature to review the public law reserving $5.1 million in annual funding for construction and lease of Simon Sanchez. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, that's the set aside of TEF funding for Simon Sanchez. So it's been in the law. There's a set aside for when that project gets to a point where a lease agreement can be signed, and that $5.1 million can be pledged as payment on that lease. And that then enables us to do that long-term, municipal lease back with the vendor. Right now, it hasn't been touched, and I don't know, it's been set aside. It won't be, it won't be touched until there's an actual lease and pledge of that amount. So we hope to get through the design phase, start that design phase, and then start preparing the solicitation for the financing and construction of Simon Sanchez High School. In order to bring that to a conclusion, we're going to need to ensure that those funds are available and able to be pledged, because then that will take first priority over most other obligations of the government once it's pledged in that form. So my question has really been: is that real money, or is TEF coming in as projected? Are there going to be? I think as Senator Terlai said, are there going to be requirements to cut elsewhere in the budget to make that a reality? I think that's the due diligence we're trying to do now.
All right, thank you. Thank you for answering the questions. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Senator.
Thank you. Senator Tello?
Almost done, everybody. Okay. Thank you so much for being here and your testimony as well, Ms. Gutierrez, for your testimony, and all the teachers and principals and staff that's here today. I know quite a bit of you. I used to work in the DO system and taking your pictures. So it's good to see you guys and still there, and I know you're working very hard. I have a couple questions with regards to the maintenance department in your agency. Who oversees your maintenance department?
We have a maintenance. We have a supervisor over the facilities and maintenance division. His name is John Kitachai.
John Kitachai. And what is his responsibility?
He is responsible for overseeing the facilities and maintenance, and these are the team of people who go out to the schools to respond to requests for work orders. So there we have we have carpenters, we have electricians, we have refrigerator mechanics who go out to review the work being done by our AC vendors and so forth.
Is any of them a plumber?
Excuse me?
Any of them a plumber?
There is, yes, we do have
Okay.
a plumbing unit.
How much
as well.
funding do you have for that department that you've set aside for?
I think they've been operating with about $1 million
With how many schools do you have?
with 41 schools.
And you're only giving them $1 million in your budget?
I think, again, if you break down the budget and you start with personnel, you start with all the major contracts, the utilities, and you see what's left over, that paints a clear picture. So, that $1 million,
Mr.
actually the $1
Fernandez,
million is for the direct, I'm sorry. The $1 million is for the direct, equipment and supplies and support. There are contractual, the contracts in place that also support facilities and maintenance. So the AC contract would be the major one for air conditioning repair. Grass cutting would be another, for grounds maintenance contracts that will be soon in place. Those are also in the support of facilities and maintenance.
Okay, I think it's quite low regardless, on your maintenance department, not only to provide the work that's needed there, but also a plan in place. Has any of or Mr. Kitachai provided you a plan moving forward on like the priorities in the schools that need to be addressed first, those safety issues? Has that department put together a plan for that?
So right now, the way it operates is that we do have a work order system in which we compile all of the requests from the schools, and then the priority is given to any immediate health and safety issues. And that's really most of the luxury that we have, is to address the immediate health and safety issues. So you'll see a lot of work orders that don't get addressed, that may not be as immediate and as emergency or not emergency issues. So that's how they're prioritizing with the resources that they have.
Okay, I think that department needs a lot of help, okay, and that perspective. But the other one question I have is, has all the increments and merit bonus up to speed today?
I believe salary increments are up to date. The merit bonuses are still being tracked but not paid out yet. I think we're tracking in, but I think once the implementation of the Competitive Wage Act was in place, we were given directive that we're not, those merit bonuses are no longer being paid at the moment. Am I right? Am I correct?
So did you make whole in FY19 those who didn't get increments?
Oh, increments are taken care of. It's
Okay,
the-
so
when you
they're all
said merit
done. So
bonuses,
the merit
those are,
bonus,
yeah,
okay.
those are still,
Okay, I
we
just
track
wanted to make
those and are
sure. So
accounting
it's
for
all
the
up to
merit
date.
bonuses.
So merit bonuses, how much is that you're looking at? Do you know?
It's in our, I think in our budget
And it is in
request,
your
we-
budget
yes.
already? Okay, I just want to make sure that's already in there.
Yes, it's in
ready
our
to go.
budget.
Okay. The other one is, you know, I made an,
Ma'am, Senator, not only is it in our budget for the anticipated, you know, we set aside what we project, but we've included all the past merit bonus because we continue to track those as potential payables later when funding is available and receive instruction to move forward. But my understanding, and I'd have to go back, is that when the Competitive Wage Act was implemented, that the merit bonuses were not, I don't know, funded or not authorized to move forward, but we were still required to track.
okay. Now, you know, the issue with the third-party fiduciary agent, you have at least 3 other areas to address on this. Have you put any funding set aside to address this, the receivership, which has already spent, what, $25 million so far?
Yes, so
And how, it's what, $2 million a year every time you're in receivership?
2.5, right?
2.5, 2.5.
Used to be higher, but it's
So
about 2.5
have
for the
you,
last couple of years.
how are you going to address it? Is there any funding in this budget to address this, to get out of this receivership?
So the way we are addressing it is to work through the reconsideration plan that we agreed to with US DOE. And again, that requires that we submit evidence of progress that they can validate, and their on-site validation visit will be the week of April 20th. So that's we're moving there. We're just trying to make sure that US DOE commits to making that visit happen before mid-year. Beyond the third party, we're in that process right now of mapping out where we will, when the third party is gone, removed, making sure that the resident functions that they were performing or oversight or monitoring, that we can show where that will take place within the organization after the third party is gone. So we're in that process right now because we're going to be presenting that.
Is there a cost associated with that?
We're still working on that. I think that, I think a lot of what we're going to do is going to be built around, anchored around the internal audit office. There has been some, suggestions here and there about creating, different offices, but right now we're working with the team in place to determine whether we'd like to see the funds. We'd like to see the funds go back to the schools as much as possible. So we're looking to see.
Well, if you're losing $2.5 million, I think you need to address this one right away.
No, absolutely. So, but what we're doing is we don't want to just commit the 2.5.
There's training, employees training,
Yes.
updating development, standard operations. You've got all kinds of things, hiring auditors, all kinds of things in here that tags with funding. So you should at least have some kind of amount of money to address this issue.
Yes. No, what we're trying to do, though, we're trying to maximize the
But
amount
you
that
don't
can
have
go
any
back.
money right now. I mean, you don't
Right.
have a number right now, is what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that right now we want to maximize the amount of money going out to the schools. We are currently mapping out the procedures for after the third party is gone. Right. We've addressed all these issues. We've a lot of what we've done over the past couple of months. We're hiring our new deputy. We are, strengthening the link between procurement and property management and evaluating the personnel needs there. We are looking at automating employee time tracking and revising the process for fixed assets management. So along with all those improvements, there will come a determination as to what amount is needed, whether it's personnel or other supports. But at this point, it's we're process mapping to ensure that we're very clear on what we're doing today and what we need to do to enhance our operations once third party is gone. Now, we believe we've addressed many of those without having to, add on to the amount of money spent on the third party. So we're going to continue that practice, but we will fill the holes as needed once we get through this process.
I think some attention should be brought to that area.
No, I want to assure you that the attention is brought to that area. So in April, a US DOE will come and they will determine whether sufficient attention has been given.
$25 million later.
Yes, absolutely.
Mr.
We really want to
Superintendent-
get past that
Yeah.
amount, so we hope we can accomplish that this year.
So, Mr. Superintendent, I made an effort during the budget bill last year, last budget cycle, to provide individual school appropriations for FY 2020, ensuring, as the chairman stated, funds go straight to teachers, students, faculty, and resources. So I feel that this would give the opportunity for principals to be able to manage their own budget within their own school. They know when there's a need to fill a vacancy right away for a class, that they don't have to go all the way to this, central office and go through all the red tape and seeing if there's any funding there. When they handle their own budget, they're able to determine what is most important and the priorities and their needs. Some of them may see that an awning, a safety issue, might be priority for them, but they don't get the approval from the front office. Certain things like that, I think, and I believe, Mr. Superintendent, you have good principles in place right now, ones who know how to balance. I mean, if anybody knows how to balance a checkbook, then you know how to balance a budget. It's very simple. So how do you feel about this year, going 2021 budget, to have this funding go directly to the schools?
So we had this discussion early on in the hearing, so I don't want to belabor it. I think Vice Speaker Nelson said that, just throwing out ideas without providing much detail might lead to misinformation or misunderstanding of what we're trying to do here. So I don't want to, belabor that point, except to say that at this point, I don't believe the principals would embrace that, but I'd be welcome you to come and join us and talk in detail about what you mean, and maybe we can provide better feedback. I will say that we did have a cursory discussion, may not have been as full. They were not eager to jump into something that they didn't quite understand fully yet. And so with respect to that, I think it merits further discussion. I would say though that if they got all the resources that were being requested, they would appreciate. And I would also support that they be given that authority to utilize the funds that they've requested. The problem is when there's a shortage of funds, hard decisions need to be made. And, do they want to be in that position of having to figure that out? Because they don't have control over personnel costs. That's controlled by our classified system of employment. Do they want to negotiate the contracts themselves? They don't control the benefits that are required. I mean, there's a lot of things that are out of their control, out of my control. So it's not like you're giving them the full
Carte blanche in order
authority,
to
right? So I think understanding the limits and whether you're going to propose greater authority, that they might be able to benefit from.
That being said, Mr. Superintendent, I know you've had conversations with the vice chair, the chair, and of course OFB, but have you visited any of the other senators to sit down and talk to them about this budget for FY 2021? Other than these two?
No.
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 Well, I recommend that if you really want to get this through, and if you want to advocate for all the hardworking teachers and principals and staff, that you meet with each one of us senators, because it does take 8 to pass this. So if you could meet with us, I would be happy to have you in my office and discuss this further. I know it's lengthy, but I would like, I think that we still have time. The budget isn't, not for another while, so I would appreciate it if we can set some time to talk about this thoroughly. So other than that,
absolutely, we're happy to set a time up.
I agree with one other thing. I do agree with what one of the other senators, I believe Senator Moylan, mentioned about the public-private partnership. And I hope that you really look into that for school sports as well as the fine arts facilities. This is a great idea, and I hope that you look into it. There are a lot of other companies out there who are willing to contribute to our school children of Guam. So I hope you look into that one.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Will do.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Vice Speaker, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you currently have public-private partnerships at DOE?
Well, we have many. It just depends. Again, it depends what you mean. So, public-private partnerships. We have it in one form with our work with the Lee schools. We work with. We just mentioned working with Guam Cancer Care and the HPV initiatives. We work with many of our nonprofit partners We work with Manetlu, we're working with the FSM Council, our sister agencies. So I think partnership is a lot of what we do. But if you mean something specific with public-private partnership, I think as Senator Moylan was indicating, it looks like more of a, I think more of a, financing, maybe management structure for some of our facilities. We're happy to look at that. You're talking about other, other areas. We welcome the partnership. We just want to know that it's good for our kids and our public school students. And maybe if it helps bring the expertise or the additional resources, we'd be very open to it. So we're not shy about that. It's just sometimes it's more difficult to manage all the different partnerships, but I think we welcome them at the school level and at the district level.
Okay. Mr. Superintendent, we've had this discussion before, and we're going to go into roundtable hearings within the next month, information hearings to discuss specific entities in GDOE, and the chair has asked me to keep my questions short because there's also going to be a continuance of this budget hearing. And so I just want to ask one question, and this is my biggest, gripe, I guess, is that you're asking, DOE is asking for $365 million. And so my biggest concern is we're getting the governor's budget, executive budget request for DOE, and it's $219 million. And so really, how do we meet I don't know if, we have $365 million to give GDOE, but I think $219.6 million is very, very low compared to your ask. And so how do we find some kind of equitable way for GDOE to be able to still meet the 14 points, to invest in specifically in our children rather than expanding certain departments like central operations within DOE? How do we focus more of the money back into the classroom, back towards the teachers, and back into the school, with us having to find a middle ground between 365 and 219? And
I appreciate that question. I know from your standpoint, the challenge is we come to you with such a huge ask, but I wanted to also assure you we're well aware of the financial conditions of the government and some of the current, ongoing challenges in even stabilizing our current finances in light of world events and other things that happen. So I don't think anyone comes here thinking that it's going to fall from the sky. But I think what I'm hopeful for is that we work together to assess what's happening in our schools right now. And I'm open to criticism with regard to if you think that there is improper spending or just in the wrong priorities. I'm open to that. But given the ask of the schools and the divisions, I think it's important that we kind of maybe come together and say these are the priorities that we can share, and then how can we make some progress, even if it's incremental progress in those categories. I think that the challenge for the legislature and for the community, around facilities has to be solvable. But it's not going to be solvable by you finding $40 million and giving it to us. And we know that's impossible. That's why I think this thinking about what can we do to find a dedicated funding stream, if it's $2 million, $3 million a year, but over time we're allowed to, commit that funding and build that funding and borrow against that funding to deal with these bigger projects like the Beneventi, canopy, like the restroom renovations. Can we do that? We know it's not going to fall from the sky, but looking at ways that we can look long-term to build that support, and then we won't be coming back here asking for $20, $30 million at a pop, because we'll have a commitment that, is there. I think when it comes down to the other asks with regard to instructional supplies and materials, and when it comes down to school safety, again, just around partnership and how can we move forward together if those are the concerns. For us, I think we can't do it alone. And so some of the requests are as if we're going to do this by ourselves, but we know that, when it comes to safety in our schools, we got to work with the police department, we got to work with the courts, we want to work with behavioral health. And anything we can do, whether you're supporting those agencies as well as GDOE, to get us to work together or make sure that we are, going to be on the same page, those types of, discussions I think would help, because we know we're well aware that you're not going to find all this money, but when we go back to our communities, there's a feeling that our facilities are going to fall apart. The kids and the families are just not the same as we used to be, and we're seeing all these negative behaviors in the schools, and we don't have enough strategies and people to deal with it. It would make sense if we're not on the different pages, but working together to say, we're, like we've done before, safety. What are we going to do around safety? I think facilities would be the next thing, just to give our kids and our families a basic, healthy learning, safe and learning environment. So I think that's going to take more hearings and more work, and we're happy to work with you. It's just, I think our obligation is to come here and make the ask on behalf of the community, and then get down to the problem solving, which may not be, the whole, request.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. I'm going to have, I know that Madam Chair wants to be able to speak, but I want to just make a very simple announcement after she's done, is that we will recess this hearing and continue in second round on April 21st at 9 a.m. so that the many questions that my colleagues have asked, we can answer. And for the purpose of the budget, I thank all my colleagues that supported the budget that passed, the budget that you're dealing with today. But Madam Chair, I know that you text me, you want to be able to respond to staff development issue of Senator Regine's and
Thank
anything
you.
else you want to state, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Lee, just for your information, we just approved the new school calendar for 2 years for DOE, and there are 9 days of staff development. It's very important that there's staff development for teachers and even the other support staff. So just to let you know, I'm sure the calendar was submitted, a copy to the speaker and to the chair on Committee of Education. Senator Tello, ever since I've been on this board, 1991, budget comes to the chair on Committee of Education and to the appropriation. So the way we do this is we give it to the chair on Committee on Education and the appropriation chair. Then they get to be responsible to give all of you. So if you want us to visit all of you, I'm sorry, because we're also working. And I trust Vice Speaker Nelson. I trust Chairman San Agustin. So if you're telling us that we should come see you, or the superintendent, I'm sorry, he's very busy too. So we hope that when the budget comes for discussion in the session, that you vote for it, because I understand you didn't even vote for the 2020 budget. So I ask you now to do that, because, to me, we do protocol, and protocol is to the chair on Committee on Education and to the appropriation chair. It goes also to the speaker. Now you talk about you're going to introduce a bill to give all the principal. Vice Speaker Nelson is working on this site-based, and that what you're talking about is just like site-based. Stop introducing bills, please, if you're not going to let the Department of Education be involved. We had a work session at the Department of Education with the board, and all principals were there. And thank you, Vice Speaker, because Mr. Birch posed that question about site-based. And a lot of them said they're ready, they need to learn more education. I was on the board when site-based was at Harmon Loop, now James Guerrero. It didn't work because they didn't get the money, okay? So that's why principal says, give us time, educate us more. Yes, we have one principal says, if they're gonna give me that I can hire and I can fire, I don't mind. Well, that's not the purpose too of site-based. I understand that site-based, but please, we're not gonna go to every one of you to ask you or to discuss this, or the superintendent. We place confidence in the vice speaker, who is the chair of committee on education, on Chairman St. Augustine. And that's all we're asking, and you want us to come, or you want superintendent to visit all of you? Well, I'm sorry, because we go protocol. We go protocol, just like you need something at Department of Education, you go to the superintendent if you're gonna visit the school, so he knows that you're going to the school, so he can let his principals know you're coming there. That's all I ask. As the chairwoman of the Board of Education, I also want you guys to do that. But, today it really bothered me, Telo, for you to say that, and yet you didn't vote on the 2020 budget for the government of Guam. I'm sorry, but don't try to, that why only the two? That's not the way it works. Thank you.
Ms. Gutierrez, I appreciate what your comments are and how you feel about it as a chairman of the board. But we all have a responsibility, a duty, to vote on things that we feel that who needs the most money. Now, if Department of Education needs this money, then they should see each of us senators, just like all the other agencies, GVB, Attorney General's office, the courts. They all visit us individually to talk to us about their budget. And if you think that's wrong, then I don't know how you're going to get the support of other senators.
I go to the speaker, who is the vice speaker.
Well,
of the
you
Committee on
need 8
Education.
people to vote on that bill.
Well, if
8.
children is the priority, if the students is a priority for all of you, then we don't have to come to each one of you. Education is top priority for all of you because it's election time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent, that, the Vice Speaker, Senator Nelson, will be announcing her roundtables, but we will recess this budget hearing for DOE until April 21st at 9 a.m., and we'll schedule the whole day, and the principal, you don't have to come unless the superintendent wants you to come, okay? Now, otherwise, I'm not inviting you. Please take care of the schools. It's nice to see you all, but I like to see the money folks. That's really who I want. So that when things need to be asked, and the deputies, but for the schools, I will be seeing you, but we will recess this hearing until the 21st at 9 a.m. All right, 21st of April. Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, can I impart my thoughts?
Oh,
If I can?
Senator Lai, yes. Say goodbye. Oh.
Where are you from, John? That's what I wanted to hear. Anyway. I was just kind of bringing up the SROs, and I heard that the Guam Police Department is taking over that, right? Or are they under the Guam Police Department?
Yeah, so right now, we are working on a request for proposals that will have to go out, and if GPD is interested, just like the courts did, they will have to bid on it. But right now, we know that the GPD has been very helpful, and I know you've been pushing them to support that as well. They've been out at our schools as part of their regular beat. They drop the 2 car, they'll bring at our high schools actually, so they'll come on campus in the morning and then to some other points during the day. And just their presence on campus is just really welcomed by our administrators. And then on the elementary side, we've seen you might have seen the junior cadet program being started up. So we really are encouraged, and we want to continue that strong partnership with the police. Now, if they're interested in submitting a proposal, they're going to be able to do so. It used to be, I guess, prior in years back that they weren't necessarily as interested, but we understand they may be interested. So once we put that out there, we look forward to.
Because John, the thing is, I'm just a little bit concerned about the safety of the schools,
Yes.
and I'm really pushing for the police reserves to support the school on that one. But anyway, I'll work on that, John, later on.
I appreciate that.
But the thing is, when I was looking at your shortfall, 140-some million? Am I right on that one?
In our shortfalls? No,
I get goosebumps when I see that.
No, I think
When
over time, we're talking about maybe between 15 and 20 million dollars over time that we've been short, if you go back over the years, yeah. Oh, you're talking about from our request? Too.
Yes,
Yes, understood.
from
Yes.
your request for the
Right.
2021. And, 141 million. What about the 284 million that you're getting from the federal funds?
So from federal funds, that's in addition to our local, so the 284 is addition to our local, so we're really getting about 60 million in federal funds. So those federal funds go primarily to supplement the schools and classrooms, so they will, you're funding, technology for our schools, you're funding robotics programs, you're funding professional development.
So that would
So it's
kind of
the-
just
yeah,
supplement just a little bit on your shortfall.
Yeah, that's given us relief. Now you have to recall that it's not always been very help. As much money given by the federal government to U.S. From USDOE. So we're now benefiting, and we're happy that they've got their funding levels to where they are today, which is about $30 to $31 million. But we don't know what the future will hold, because I know that the president has continued to introduce budgets that show cuts to the department and to their resources. So for now, as we go through this local, budgetary situation, we are glad that we're not seeing reductions on the federal side, because that's helped support the classrooms and the school programs.
Thank you, John. Mrs. Gutierrez, I did vote for that budget.
Thank you. And Senator Terlahi, I grew up in Jonia Rose.
All right, it is now 4:15. The committee will continue to receive any testimony that needs to be submitted before the continuance of this budget hearing on the 21st. And Sus Masi, for your attendance, administrators, principals, hope not to see you on the 21st. And for those at home, thank you for watching. You all have a nice day. Thank you.